Okay, we're live. All right, everyone. Welcome back to an amazing achievement. It's 10 episodes and Chatting with Nuts. You all keep showing up, so I keep going live every 2 weeks. I wonder when you all come to your senses and, leave me to wallow in my own self-pity. But, we're back for the 10th episode. And I wanted to bring on someone that could teach me something and provide some amazing conversation. And that is why we have Sarah from Sarah Read. Sarah, how are you?
I'm good, Jimmy. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I recently was going through your channel. I was watching through like your best ofs, and you were doing a best of series, and I was just so impressed by how well spoken you are. And then you also did a video recently talking about writing, and I believe that what was the exact topic of that? I can't remember.
It was books that I recommend for people who would like to write fantasy.
That was it. So I watched that because I do write in my free time, and I was just I was just really impressed. I was really impressed with the way that you stated it. I thought you actually gave really, really good advice as well. And then we've been on discussions. We discussed John Gwynne, Shadow of the Gods on Dr. Phillips' channel, which was awesome. And yeah, we had a good time. So I figured it would be perfect opportunity to bring you on and to introduce you to Chatting with Nuts and the wildness that is this live show. And I've seen you in the chat before, right?
Yes, I do try to tune in whenever I can.
Awesome. Gonzalez says, hi, Sarah, came here for you. Well, we're glad
thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. We got some of my patrons, all my patrons. Shout out to all my patrons. They've been wonderful, very busy in chat today and in our Discord, and it's been it's been fun today. Patrick Leah says,
Patrick, what time is it there?
Patrick, my friend, you should be recovering. Forget me.
Rest, drink some soup.
Yes, it's always good to see Patrick. I think it's the first time Patrick's caught one of these live, actually.
That's my sister. I was like, you have to sign on in case no one comes to talk to me.
No, there's always people wanting to commune. People have been throwing around this term communing with the nut god, and I have no idea where it stemmed from, but for some reason it's the hot topic. And I'm even drinking coffee tonight, so that tells me I'm bringing my A game. Man carrying thing. Legend was my 9th guest 2 weeks ago. We had a wonderful conversation. One of the most successful episodes that we've had here on Chatting with Nuts. And my patron, good friend, and fellow booktuber Noel. How you doing? Oh, it's Dr. Philip.
Hello, Dr. Chase.
Did you watch booktube a lot before you started your channel, or was it kind of an all at once thing?
No, I did. I watched it for, I don't think it was quite a year. I watched it while I was studying for my licensing exam, actually. That was how I took my breaks from studying, because YouTube videos are short. So it's a pretty good amount of time for a study break. So I'd say it was probably close. I think it was around 8 months. And I actually started the channel and made a bunch of videos, and then kind of got too nervous to post them and scrapped them, and then came back and got my courage back and started anew. Yeah.
Well, so was there a moment though, or a video you watched or something when you said, you know what, this is it's time to get behind the camera?
There wasn't a particular video. There have been a lot of videos that I have been impressed by, but what gave me the push forward was actually I participated in a reading challenge or a readathon on the Shelf Space Discord. And it was very small. So they just did another one, which ended up being gigantic, which was great because it means that more people are there and more people are interacting. But it was a smaller one around Christmas time. And one of my friends from in the group started a channel, and I was like, okay, well, I will do it too. And we'll kind of do it together and support each other while we do it. And it ended up being a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think Derry speaks for all of us saying glad you found your courage, and we're glad that you started the channel. I'm going to be honest. I know I'm in the booktube community. What in the hell is a readathon? I don't know what that is.
So that was the first time I had ever participated in one as well. So basically, it's just for these particular ones, it was a month of reading. And you had a number of prompts. So for the first one, I think it was for Christmas, it was 12, like the 12 days of Christmas. So it was 12 different prompts where you had to read books that fit those prompts. And then for every so many pages you read, you got points for your team. So it was kind of like a race to read a lot. And it just built like a sense of community. It helped me get to know some people in the community, which was really, it was just really fun overall.
Yeah, that's excellent. See, I've actually never, like, I was so different when I started booktube. Like, I didn't do a book tag for like my first year or so. Like, I just didn't do a lot of the booktube things because I just wasn't aware of them because I only watched a few channels. So I've always heard readathon, and then a read along, which I'm still, I mean, I understand what a read along is at its core, but I don't understand how people organize it so well. I feel like whenever I read along with people, it's just, we're going to read this book around the same time period and we'll talk about it as we go, kind of thing.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Alan, hi.
The legend, Alan himself. Team Zane. I mean Zeus.
Yes, I was on Alan's team for this readathon.
Your overlord is here. Man, when the nut god. Sounds like a Brazzers username or something. That's no good. Jimmy, this is my favorite Friday night event. Fantastic. Your bookshelves and white doors in the background look identical.
Oh, for us, that's true. That's true.
I guess
we've got the same aesthetic going on
we,
here.
We ordered the booktuber's room decor set off Etsy, and it took 6 weeks to get here because of COVID, but here it is.
It took 6 months to get to Newfoundland.
Yeah. came on a sled with some dogs pulling it, I'm sure,
yes.
Right? One thing that Sarah doesn't have, and I have to point this out because I've actually had a couple people, I had a hangout with my patrons, my top tier patrons. We do a monthly hangout, and they were like, what is that behind you? And someone said something that I can't remember what they thought it was. I wish I could remember what they said. It was something totally off, but this is actually a refractor telescope. It's like 4 feet tall. I think it's like almost 5 feet tall. So everyone that's wondering, I've had a couple comments about it, and then with my patrons, like, what in the world is that? It's a refractor telescope.
I thought it was your book cannon for launching your Wheel of Time books out the window.
Well, I got to keep them around just in case the show is awesome. You never know. You never know. And today we got a poster. We got an official. Did you see the poster?
I did.
What'd you think?
To be honest, I'm not really sure. I haven't read Wheel of Time, so I feel like I'm definitely my weight is not worth a whole lot here. But I feel like they've taken some of the classic imagery, at least that I've seen from the series, and changed it. And I don't really understand why, because I feel like it is a lesser form than the original.
Yeah, I was curious to see how the fandom would react to them kind of getting rid of the wheel, because the wheel's so iconic.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was pretty positive, which I think is a good sign, because with an adaptation of 14 books, like, a lot of things are going to have to be cut and changed and worked around. And for at least from the people I see, which I generally try to interact with just mostly positive people,
Mm-hmm.
Everyone seems very upbeat about this. And I thought the poster was really good. I actually enjoyed it a lot. I kind of agree with your points that you made there. I saw a wider picture of the poster where it has like more things off to the side, and I thought that one didn't look as good, but I mean, it is what it is. It's like a banner, it's not a lot to go on. It's kind of like the teaser trailers. Like, we just haven't had a lot to go on.
Right. And if you don't know the series intimately, then the tiny details that they work in there for the fans, they don't really hit you the same. Like, I wouldn't recognize those kinds of things, even if they had put them in there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because there's like some weaves in the bottom of the poster, which is really cool, because there's also a big question of whether or not we'll be able to see those in the show. And from what I understand from the showrunners of Wheel of Time, they're saying if a person is able to use magic, you will see it. So could be really cool. We'll see. I mean, I was actually talking about this with my wife. We went on a walk and after work and before the show, and everyone knows on my channel, Wheel of Time's not my favorite, but I'm very interested, and I'm kind of curious to see what other people who maybe didn't love the books would think. I think there is an opportunity for the show to reframe characters in the books in my mind, and also the feel. Because what I have found to be a little bit grating and nerve-wracking when it comes to kind of, I don't want to say whining, but there's a lot of turmoil between the characters and there's a lot of complaints, but maybe it'll come off as more of a tone of desperation in this very dire situation that they're placed in, which I didn't get that from the text. And I'm wondering if the tone of the show could then change my appreciation for what I'm reading in the books.
Well, that would be the hope.
Yeah. Or or it ends up like the Dark Tower movie, and we just don't talk about it.
God, nothing could be that bad.
I'll be honest. I actually haven't watched it. I've seen
Consider
clips.
yourself lucky.
Oh, I'm gonna watch it because I finished Dark Tower, so I gotta watch the movie. It's like Dragon Ball the movie. It was terrible, but I had to watch it.
Also, this is not the place, but we need to find a time to have a conversation about the end of the Dark Tower.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'm gonna do a chat. Actually, there's just so many people I want to bring on that I have to like figure out how to coordinate it. It's kind of like our talk we have tomorrow morning.
Yes.
We are doing a talk on Alex Nevaez's channel, and it'll be for A Time of Dread by it is Time of Dread, right? Not Time.
The first
Time
one.
of
Yep.
Dread, yes. In a Blood and Bone trilogy by John Gwynn tomorrow. We'll be recording that. I think it's live, actually, right?
I think so. The previous ones were not, but I believe this one is live.
Yeah, this one I'm taking a step up. We're going live. It's going to be wild. But yeah, I was impressed that we were able to coordinate so many people together, and now I got to figure out how to do that for Dark Tower because there's a lot of stuff to talk about with the Dark Tower. And one thing I want to bring up that I think is phenomenal, and people in chat, I would almost guarantee you don't know this unless if you're following Sarah on social media, but why don't you tell everyone how you did your yearbook? Your senior yearbook.
So that was my medical school yearbook.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Even better. Even better.
So it, like all yearbooks, they ask you for a quote. And I would not say that I am shy, but I am an introverted person. So in terms of having like a lot of inside jokes or really funny things to say in the yearbook, I did not have any of that. I found out things about my medical school classmates 5 or 6 years after medical school was over because I was just not in that, like, that is not what I like to do. Yes, I have a lot to do. So we had to pick a quote for the yearbook, and I picked a Dark Tower quote. So,
and what was that quote?
What is it? It's a quote about Ka. I have it on Instagram here. Let's see. I don't want to misquote it because then
I read it twice because I was like, wait, she really did that. I didn't know it was your medical school. That's so funny.
It makes it extra nerdy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. It's so bold.
Ka works and the world moves on, which I thought was fitting. It's the end of an era when you finish medical school. A lot of you goes into that. It's a pretty intense experience. So I felt like it was fitting. It is one of my very favorite series of all time. So I thought I would throw that in there.
Yeah, you're a huge Dark Tower fan. And I would be a remiss to not mention the fact of your credentials that you were in medical school. And why don't you tell I mean, I'm sure a lot of people here probably already know, but I would love for you to talk about, your profession and what you do.
Sure. So I am a psychiatrist. So basically what that means is I went to medical school. So I'm a medical doctor. And then I did a psychiatry residency afterward. And there is a little bit of a difference in the United States versus Canada. In Canada, you do a residency for 5 years when you become a psychiatrist. I believe in the US it's 4. I think it's a little bit shorter, but I'm not 100% sure. But I actually was in general practice first. I had a baby in my very last week of medical school.
Wow.
And then wrote my licensing exam 1 month later. So it was a really intense time, and a 5-year residency seemed very daunting. So I went into general practice and was just really drawn to the psychiatric part of things, but could never spend the amount of time that I wanted to. And for anybody who watches my channel, you probably know that I talk too much. It did not work for those like 10-minute general practice appointments. I needed more time. I need an hour to talk to somebody. So I went back into a psychiatry residency and did that. Also, you would, Alan, you would quote Napoleon in your yearbook.
Yeah, I feel like I really missed out. I mean, Philip Chase saying he quoted, Lord of the Rings. I mean, you have Dark Tower. I don't think I quoted anything. I didn't say a word. I was silent. I was like Harding Grim. I kept it all inside, I guess. But yeah, the reason why I wanted to bring up your profession, one, omega impressive. But obviously, you probably look at characters in a lot different of a light than most of us. I would assume, at least.
I would think so. I would hope so. I would hope that all of this time spent means that I at least have the tools to be able to start to look at things a little bit differently. And characters are my favorite part of any fantasy series, which is why I love Robin Hobb so much.
Oh yeah.
But I have always been drawn to character-driven narratives, even before I went into medicine and before I chose the career path that I did. But I do feel like it allows me to have some greater reflection. I think that it's also helpful in sometimes being able to gauge where a story is going to go. And it really, at least I think it helps me recognize when people are doing things really well. I can see, these are patterns that I see in life all the time. And I feel like when I see that reflected in fiction, I assume that the person writing that fiction has a really good grip on humanity and what it means to be human. And so there are definitely standout authors, in my opinion. And that was the first video that I did in terms of my best of fantasy. So it was who I felt wrote the best characters. But yeah, that is kind of my primary lens whenever I read anything. I'm also a sucker for beautiful prose, but those are kind of my two go-tos in fantasy. If a book has those things, then I can forgive some plot-related flaws.
Yeah, I actually I'm very similar to you. I always go with character driven books. I mean, sometimes I don't mind a switch up, but I'm definitely character driven. Love beautiful prose, and then obviously whatever tropes and themes happen to be in the book will then land me, high or low. Alan seems to say that there's someone who has the best characters, and then obviously it's Robin Hobb, but who else other than Robin Hobb?
I feel like what the answer he's looking for is Sebastian de Castell, because this is the book series that we bonded over. And it's funny because it gets sold as like this swashbuckling fantasy series, which it very much is. And if you only ever read the first book, then I feel like you will come out of it being like, don't see that woman as a psychiatrist because she has no idea what she's talking about. What is this book? But I think the series just improves as it goes on. And I think that De Castell does write character relationships really well. So if that is the answer that Alan was looking for, then I definitely agree. But yes, they do have the best friendships. But I've heard him say that Daniel Abraham also writes really good characters. Yes. And I'm looking forward to reading some of his books too.
Yeah, Daniel Abraham did something in The Dagger and the Coin, and I won't give away any spoilers, but he did something that I really, really enjoyed. And, it's something that's explored a lot in fantasy. Is the old mentor character or guardian or protector, and then like a young person. And when that young person sometimes, or when that young person is a female, there are times where they write it poorly. Like people write it poorly. I think it comes off kind of creepy. Like there's always like that weird line that you can't cross. Daniel Abraham has one of my favorite like male older guardians with a younger female lead that is just excellent. I mean, he balanced that relationship perfectly. And it's just one that's fumbled a lot. And I think that he knocked it out of the park. And I think his character relationships, especially how it evolves over in Dagger and the Coin, obviously the Expanse is great too. But man, the Dagger and the Coin has some of my favorite relationships. And also manipulation in relationships, different expectations for what the relationship is. There's a ton of that to sink your teeth into with him. So I think you would have a really good time with Daniel Abraham's work, especially the Dagger and the Coin.
Excellent. That's the series that I have the first 2 books for. I tried to find the Long Price Quartet books, but couldn't find them anywhere for sale. And I feel like after the pandemic, I'm getting a little bit of Kindle burnout. I really like reading on Kindle, but it feels like it's all I've been doing for such a long time that I really want some physical books to read.
Yeah, what is that, man? Like what is that? Because you know what? It doesn't make any sense to own physical books anymore. It just doesn't, right?
Nope.
My eyesight is degrading rapidly, and it's frightening. And I can do better accessibility options on my Kindle. It is most of the time cheaper. It's easier to hold. Every single pro goes to my Kindle. However,
this is what you need. This is why.
I have a nightmare of a moving task sitting behind me. What is that? I mean, I actually am very curious. What do you think it is? It's just switching context and the feels of the books? Because I will say there are times where I'll read 50 pages on a Kindle. I'll turn that off and I'll pick up, if I have the physical book as well, I'll go pick up the physical book. I'll be able to read 50. I can switch back and forth. And it's just like my brain processes it so much differently.
I think part of it too is a sense of accomplishment. We like to be able to see what we're doing and get some sort of concrete indication. Yeah, yes, Alan, I know. I've tried to find them on Amazon, but it's so hard to get them shipped to Canada. But yes, I feel like, at least for me, it's nice to have that concrete feedback. If I pick up my physical book, which is, I'm in the room with all my books and there's not one close enough to me to flop open. But if I see like 50 pages on the other side and I can look at that, I'm like, yes, I'm doing so well. And this is, I also have a problem. Like, this is what happens when you go to med school, is that you're so reward based. You're like, okay, I'm accomplishing things. Yes, this is how I know I'm being successful, which is a horrible mindset. So I don't know why I'm giving anybody this advice or talking about it, but I can't change it. It's been like that for a really long time.
Yeah. And, Matt actually brings up a good point. He enjoys being around like the books I enjoy. Dude, legitimately, sometimes I work from home and I'll be just like frustrated with something and I'll just come downstairs and I'll just sit in front of my shelves and I'll pop off a book I've had. I'll just open it to a random page and read, or I'll just sit there and just look at the books I want to read that I still have on my shelves. And it literally is a like mood enhancer. Like there's definitely some sort of like consumer endorphin rush knowing I have these things.
That's your serotonin burst for the day.
Yeah. Well, my parents really like antiques. They like old toys, collectors and things like that. So that was kind of, Antiques Roadshow was on my house a lot. And I think that I have that collector's gene in a small way. I'm just very fortunate that it's with books and not something more expensive,
Yeah, this is true.
And I love going through used bookstores and just trying to find, good deals. I got to tell you this. Baron was giving me a whole bunch of crap in my Discord. He's one of my patrons because my local bookstore had the old Dark Tower art, like the ones I didn't know this. So I always knew that they were awesome, but I didn't know. I didn't know they were worth like $300.
Wow.
They were like $12 because the shop, it's a random shop. They don't seem to price anything. Like I got a copy of the first print of the American Silmarillion, and I got it for like $30. The thing's worth like 180, right?
Wow.
So they had all of the books besides, I can't remember the numbers, maybe like 3 and 4, or maybe it's 4 and 5. And I could have got like almost a whole set of them. And I went to get them and they were gone.
Oh no.
I was destroyed. I was destroyed.
I am so sad about I'm on the one hand really sad, and on the other hand, I will never get rid of them. But I have the weirdest like mishmash group of Dark Tower books because it's kind of a combination of my dad's old ones that he passed on when he upgraded his set, and the ones that came out when it was like the ones that came out for 5, 6, and 7 when they were being released, but I don't think I could let them go. I did send an email to Juniper Books, which would be my most frivolous purchase ever, to price a customized set. And they asked me to come up with an idea for the artwork to put on the covers, which I will need help with. So if there's any people who like Dark Tower and are artistic, then I would need help with that. But they do have, apparently they have bound them for people before. So they actually have hardcover copies available and can customize them for you. So this will be my purchase that I think about making for like the next 6 months until I finally decide if I'm going to do it.
Yeah, if there's anyone out there that can help Sarah with that and come up with some really cool covers for Juniper to do the Dark Tower, this is an amazing opportunity, because I would gladly open up my wallet that I don't use because everything's digital now. I would definitely open up my wallet and fork out some hard-earned cash for that. That would be awesome.
So it would be so good. So I just have to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. My mother Mama Nuts is in the chat. Hello, Mom. Hello. It's good to see you. LPQ went out of stock on Indigo. Someone was saying Indigo had it in stock for Canadian retailers. So that's pretty cool. I'm so jealous. Do you still have the art?
I don't have the art. That's or is he talking to you?
No, I think he's talking to you.
So I don't have any art for the books. That's what they want me to think about or to come up with, is to decide on a design that they could then put on the books, because they have their own graphic artists. They just want you to come up with an idea. I think they had a couple that people have done in the past, but I didn't love them. One was a rose motif, which I know is fitting, but it just wasn't my style. And I don't remember what the other was, but I really like, so I have an old copy of The Wastelands, and it has that kind of rose galaxy cover, which
Yeah.
I like, but it's just thinking about how to expand and extrapolate and
Well, the
stick
Dark
that on a
Tower
book.
is so many things.
So many things.
And it's funny, you know, with your background and your profession, I'm sure the characters of the Dark Tower threw you for a loop.
Oh my gosh.
Split personality. There's a sociopath. There's an addict. I mean, wow. Stephen King really tried to cover it all in the Dark Tower. I saw Noelle earlier. She put in the chat that Dark Tower intimidates her. Noelle, it should not intimidate you because it's actually a pleasure to read. And King's writing grows as the series goes on. The only thing I have to say for Dark Tower is that you have to be willing to go on a ride, and you have to be willing to just sit back and experience the weirdness that it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you think about it too much, or you're not okay with things getting a little freaky, I think that's where people could struggle. Also, it does get a little bit meta towards the end. I like that stuff. It felt like a natural progression of the weirdness for me, to be honest. So I liked it. I enjoyed it. Sarah, would you say that Dark Tower is intimidating, or if it isn't, how would you phrase pitching it to somebody?
I definitely don't think it's intimidating in the way that Malazan is intimidating for people.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to need a PhD to make it through the book. It's very accessible writing wise. I think that what might turn some people off, and I think this is what happens when they read the first couple, is that tonally the books are very distinct.
Yes.
If you read The Gunslinger and then you go into The Drawing of the Three expecting more of the same, that is not what you get. And it's kind of like that for the whole series. It really changes and shifts, which I think fits the world that Stephen King has built really well. You are introduced in the first novel to the world that has moved on.
Yeah.
And I think that those tonal shifts and the differences in how he presents each book really fits that background and that setting. That is the kind of world building that I really like. So this is not your Brandon Sanderson intricate, I'm going to give you all of the details of the currency and the religion and build up a world that you can understand. This is, I am going to set my characters up and set my plot up so that it reflects the type of world that they live in. And I really like that. It is weird. Yeah. It's wacky, but I don't think that it's difficult to get into. It may not be for you. It's not for everybody, but I don't think it's hard to give the first couple of books a read.
Yeah. And they're not terribly long until you get into, you know, obviously 4 is pretty big. I would say that's the biggest one. That is the biggest book, actually, isn't it? I believe.
I'm actually not sure because my 4 is a paperback and the other 3 are hardcovers. So they look, yeah, they look equally as large, but I'm not really sure. 4 I love, so it never takes me time to read through it. So it doesn't feel that long to me.
Yeah. Stuart asks, is Dark Tower better than The Shining? Because I did not like that. Stuart's one of my patrons. It's always good to see you in chat, Stuart. And he was at the Hangout the other day as well. But yeah, Stuart, it depends on what you didn't like about The Shining. If it was just the story didn't catch you or whatever, I would say, yeah, give Dark Tower a shot. If it was Stephen King's writing or his overall weirdness, I would not recommend it. But it is so hard to categorize Dark Tower. It is so hard. And I think that's one of its positives. I think it's like, okay, you're going to read the fantasy genre. Dark Tower has to be mentioned in that conversation just because there is nothing like it.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah, and also I love the setting. The world that has moved on is probably my favorite setting of any book. It's between that and Westeros, I would say, for me.
And this is why I love book 1, which I know is, especially for people who are new to the series and they're coming in, book 1 is very divisive. Some people really love it. Some people say you don't even need to read it. Just jump into book 2. But from the very first chapter of book 1, he sets up a world that is so easy to get lost in with so many details that make you understand how weird it is and how abnormal it is, even for the people who live there. You kind of feel that confusion with them. So if you like that, if you like being really immersed in a book, then I think you would really like The Gunslinger.
Yeah, atmospheric is something that Stephen King is known for. And I think it's like to its maximum within the Dark Tower series. And I love that. I love being immersed in a book or a series in this instance. And like Sarah said, everything is so distinct. Each entry is like its own shade of gray. It's so weird. I mean, one is like an 80s action movie. Another is a flashback kind of Western romance, which sounds terrible. That sounds awful. It is not. Like I dislike, most of the time I don't like romances in books because it's done poorly. And I also don't love flashbacks. King was like, oh, here's a book with both those things. And it was probably my favorite out of the 7. So that tells you what he's trying to accomplish, or rather what he accomplished. He just kind of took everything that is in the fantasy genre, turned it on its head, but not in like the subversion way where it's like the opposite. It's just like, oh, I'm going to do something totally different with this character. And it's really interesting because, without giving away too much, the characters are aware of the situation that they're in and that it is fantasy-like because they're from our world. And the fact that they have expectations about their own story because they know what Lord of the Rings is, it's so heady. I love it.
It is. It's like a love letter to fantasy.
Yes.
Written in the weirdest way possible.
Yes. And Stephen King's writing is extremely accessible. And I think that he levels up so much as the story goes on. Like, this might be a controversial opinion. This is actually not correct. Never mind. I was going to say I wouldn't mind if someone started out their Stephen King journey with The Dark Tower. The only reason why I wouldn't recommend that maybe is because there are some books that would get spoiled. Specifically, Salem's Lot would be spoiled for you.
Yes.
If you read, but you know what? Maybe it doesn't matter. It's funny. Everyone tells you to read like 100 books of Stephen King before you read Dark Tower. I personally think that now when I go read Insomnia and other books that tie in, I'm gonna enjoy those more because of my cassette.
Yes, you can get it both ways. Those were my first books. I read The Talisman, which he wrote with Peter Straub. That was my first Stephen King novel. But I went right into Dark Tower then and didn't read any other Stephen King until, well, it was between 4 and 5. So during the wait between book 4 and book 5, that's when I read a bunch of his other books. But Dark Tower was my first real introduction to him.
Yeah. Dark Tower sounds super interesting, but I really struggle with King's writing style in The Stand, which really concerns me for Dark Tower. Yeah, I would say you're Jake, that you probably would not enjoy Dark Tower if that's the case. I don't, because Stephen King does develop as a writer as he's going on, and I don't necessarily think The Stand is his best writing, even though it's one of my favorites from him. But if the way I don't know. The Stand is it's also long. The pacing, I think the pacing probably lines up a lot with Dark Tower.
Stephen King likes to meander sometimes, and if you love his writing, then you appreciate that. But if you don't, then it can be difficult.
Yeah, Dr. Philip Chase here. Dark Tower is a unique, genre-defying, and brilliantly bizarre. I love it so far. Yeah. That's. I just say weird because that's really what it is, and the interconnected Stephen King universe is pretty interesting. Like this Pennywise going to pop up somewhere. Read and find out. Read and find out. My first King was It. I loved it. I think my introduction was The King and It in 10th grade. I think a lot of people started with it, which is crazy because it's one of his longest. I mean, it is his longest, I think, and darkest books that you can start out with.
And I actually haven't read it.
Really?
No.
I read it when I was really young, and I don't even remember if I finished it or when I did. So when I read it, I'll let you know. Maybe we can do one of those read-alongs I keep hearing so much about.
There we go. I would like to read it in October. It's one of his books that's kind of highest on my list.
It's so funny because I always read King in October.
Right, it's a good time.
Yeah, I did Pet Sematary and had a blast with that. And
that's what I did last October.
Yeah,
freaked the crap out of me.
No, also Shimmy is always giving me the read and find out. I know, and I hate to do it. I actually kind of hate saying Raffo, but it is a thing, right? I am reading it in October for Halloween. Well, maybe we'll have to do something. Maybe we'll pull it together.
This is a plan.
Chat, what do you think? Do we do a read along on the Fantasy Network in October when I'm also starting a Song of Ice and Fire reread and I think I'm reading Malazan at the same time.
You may as well go all in.
Why not? You did mention Malazan, and I started Gardens of the Moon this past week, which has been a trip. How are you? Have you started into Malazan?
No, I just bought the first 2 books when I went to the bookstore a couple weeks ago, so I'm getting ready to read them. I think tentatively I have said that I'm going to start in August. So July, I'm trying to catch up on a bunch of 2021 releases and just read some so that I can give some sort of feedback on what people should add to their TBRs, should not add to their TBRs. But I'm going to read it in August. So
Very cool.
I'm nervous but excited.
Yeah, very cool. I was sold on this by many people, namely Philip Chase, Dr. Philip Chase, Rhythma, and then Noelle. Noelle had a wonderful Gardens of the Moon. She was actually like the last person to kind of give me the nudge and put me over the edge. And it's been an experience. Malazan is obviously talked about, and it is very polarizing, and everyone has some sort of take on how confusing it is or isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to find all of the things I've ever heard to be true, in good and bad ways. And I'm having quite a trip with it. Down the lane, Joanna says, "Yay, Jimmy! I'm excited to hear your thoughts about Gardens of the Moon." Yeah, I wonder when I'll get it finished, and I also wonder how I'm going to review it, because I feel like a lot of my review is going to be stating my experience, like my experience with introducing myself to this series.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like it's going to be a hit with you?
I don't know. I don't know what to expect. Really heavy world building is not usually my thing. I like the complex characters. I'm okay if the world building takes a backseat to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear, and you get so much conflicting information about Malazan. So some people say the character work is not obvious, but it is there. And the characters are well developed, and it just takes time and effort to discover that, which I am totally on board for. It took over Philip's #1 spot above the Lord of the Rings. So I
Which
feel
is your
like
#1 as well.
It is. It is. So I feel like I have to read it because of that. So I would say I have tempered expectations, but I hope to love it. I want to love it.
Yeah, I will say this. So, like, you know, a lot of people have read Lord of the Rings. I think once you get into the extended Tolkien universe and you kind of see all the stuff from the Silmarillion, and I think channels like Men of the West, and I'm forgetting in Deep Geek, and all these people who really bring a lot of Tolkien's world building to life, and you realize it for me, it gave a new level of respect and appreciation for what he's done with Middle Earth and everything, and those damn hobbits. I feel reading Gardens of the Moon, I'm about halfway through. I think I'm like 300, maybe a little shy of 400 pages in. I feel that kind of epicness from the world. I really do. Where I'm like, where's my Silmarillion for this? For this, I need a reference guide.
Please, I need my compendium.
And I'll talk about this more in my review. I am surprised. I'll kind of walk everyone through my feelings about Malazan. And I think, Sarah, you and I look for a lot of the same things in the book, so you can kind of judge how my experience has been. But with Gardens of the Moon, obviously it opens up. Everybody knows it's a bit confusing. I think the events are easier to follow in the grand scheme than I thought they would be, but the context is extremely ambiguous. You don't really know why things are happening or if it matters. And that's always tough because you want to be emotionally invested in the story. And like me and you said, like, we like to be in on the characters' emotions. Like, we like to get attached to characters. So the interesting thing I found with Malazan is that the mystery of it all and the confusion is what made me want to keep turning the pages. I started out, I was going to read a chapter a night, and now I'm starting to read 2 chapters. Now I'm trying to sneak them in after, I'm reading Red Rising as well right now. And I'm like, I finished my reading goal for Red Rising. Let's pick up Malazan again. Like, let's go back. And that mystery is driving me forward. However, that can only go so far. And I'm in the mood for it right now. And I have had to read like recaps and stuff after the fact. There's a lot of resources out there from Malazan, which is awesome. Baba in Alex Nevaez's Discord server actually linked me like a user guide or some shit. And it's like, okay, this is ridiculous.
That's how you know it's intense. There's a user guide for your book.
You have to read a book to read a book. It's like, oh my goodness. But it is very helpful. But I wonder how long that can last. Now, I started into, I did book 2 and then got into the book 3 because the book is split up into books. So when I say books, I mean parts. So part 3, started reading. It's fascinating. Erickson has started to get me attached to these characters with pretty much all indirect characterization. And I think that's really impressive, especially coming from Realm of the Elderlings, where I'm in Fitz's head and I'm seeing him formulate opinions about people around him. And then I get attached to characters based on his reactions and his relationships. Whereas with Erickson, it's almost how the characters interact with the world they're in. And I don't always get to see their introspection, but based on literal like face twitches, right? Like facial expressions that he describes, And it's like a Scott from my Discord and my Patreon was saying how it's the most extreme version of show don't tell he's ever seen from an author, and I can't agree more. And for better or for worse, really. And there's some things in there that have definitely tripped me up and confused me a lot. And there are times where I can read a paragraph and have no idea about what was just said because there's so many made up words. But I'm very impressed with the indirect characterization work that Erickson's done. I'm actually like really into like 2 or 3 of the characters. So I'm interested to see where you end up.
Yes, that definitely makes me feel a little bit more optimistic. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Because with me, especially a 10-book series, 10 huge books, I have to get emotionally tied. I have to.
Yeah.
How far have you read into the realm of the Elderlings?
So I have actually only read the first trilogy. The Live Ship Traders has been holding me back for so long. If it went directly from the first Fitz trilogy to the second, I know I would have already had them and read them by now, but I don't want to move away from Fitz. I have many unpopular fantasy opinions, one of which is I vastly prefer single narratives to multi-POV stories. So I also am a little bit nervous going from Fitz to all of those other characters in the second in the Live Ship books. And I don't like the ocean, which is funny because I live on an island.
I don't like nautical fantasy either. So I had that bias going in, and then Robin Hobb stomped it out of me. And
I'm sure she will for me too.
Yeah, I think based on what you like in books, and even if it is from a multiple perspective, storytelling angle, I think that you are going to really like it because I think it has some of the best character development I've ever seen. Like book 1 to 3, there's character development that some other authors were not able to accomplish in 14 or 15 books. That was just a random shot at Wheel of Time. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I haven't read them all. I can't judge. I'm just trolling. But really though, there are people with 5 or 6, 7, 8 book series that they never even touch the amount of development we see from the characters from book 1 to 3. Whether it's going from hating to loving or loving to hating, or thinking someone is going to be this amazing thing. Expectations is all what Live Ships is about. And whew, is it good? You're gonna have a good time.
I'm excited. I do want to read it. And I think part of what has also been holding me back, which is a ridiculous reason, is that here I can only get those awful mass market paperbacks. And it's not that I hate mass market paperbacks. If Alan is still in the chat, I apologize. I do not hate mass market paperbacks, but those ones are so big and they're so tightly bound that I can barely open the book. So I really want to get the trade copies so that I can read it more comfortably.
Yeah, I'm actually reading mass market paperback Gardens of the Moon. I haven't read a mass market paperback in over a year now, and it's actually really nice. I like it. Someone asked me, I'm trying to find it here. I wanted to answer their question. No disclaimer. He said, who are the 3 characters? And this is talking about Gardens of the Moon, who I was enjoying. Tattersall, Paran, and I would say after that, what is the gentleman's name? I mean, I really like Krupp or Kruppe. I don't know how you say his name. I really like him. There's like a handful of characters that are really strong. And it's just impressive with, again, how little we sit in their head. Whereas compared to Live Ships, you get it all. I mean, there is some trauma in that series.
I'm not shocked. There's some trauma in the first series too.
Yeah. I would say, I'd say Robin Hobb is the best at stomping all over my soul when it comes to an author. I decided to go join Jimmy's Patreon on the app is having stress. I'm sorry to hear that, but thank you. Hobb is on the eternal. Chase, all the love for Live Ships, all the love. Interesting. Heather says, I'm not super interested in the Fitz books. I want to jump straight into the ship books, but I feel weird about skipping straight to them. So yeah, you should read Farseer first. And I think it'll surprise you, especially Royal Assassin. Royal Assassin is literally one of the best books I've ever read.
Agreed. So good. So
good. What would you say makes Hobb stick out for you the most?
In terms of her character work is amazing, but what I think makes it amazing is that more than any other author that I have read, and this includes people like Joe Abercrombie, who I think also does a fantastic job, Fitz feels the the most lifelike of any fantasy character that I have read. And I think that's what gives people such a visceral reaction, is that he makes decisions, which includes mistakes, that are so frustrating, but you can understand them all in the context of what he has gone through. Mm-hmm. And without spoilers, because we know going into, like, just from the description of Farseer, that it is about the bastard son of royalty who kind of gets adopted into the family. And even from that sentence, we have so much to unpack. There is this childhood trauma, there is interrupted attachment, there is a dissonance in identity, in expectation. It's so rich. You get so much from just one sentence of that. And Hobb takes it all the way. She does a good job with that, because that feels very tropey. That's something that we see all the time. It's something that's very common. It is your quintessential fantasy setup. But Hobb takes it in a direction and does it so well that it's just like unlike anything else that I have ever read. In psychiatry, we do something called an etiological formulation. So this is how we help to contextualize our patients.
Let's go. This is what I'm here for. Let's go, Sarah.
So when I meet somebody for the first time, often they've been waiting a long time to see me because unfortunately access is a problem. And they have, for the most part, been through a lot of things. So in order to try to best meet their needs, I need to find a framework that I can use to understand what they've been going through, to be able to empathize with that to the fullest degree, being someone who's outside that experience. Mm-hmm. And so the basic framework that they teach you, and the way that you learn to think about patients, and it becomes automatic over time, but it takes time to get into it, is this etiologic formulation. So basically you look at patients from what's called a biopsychosocial perspective. So you look at the biological factors, the psychological factors, and the social factors that have brought them from the person that they were born as to the person that they are when they are in front of you. And one way that I can know that an author is writing good characters is that I can begin to formulate them without any effort. I know enough about their background and their biology. I know enough about their psychological defenses, which are things, if you didn't do any intro psychology courses, are things like, basically it's the way that your mind helps process your experiences of the world. So lots of people have heard of the mature defenses, which are like altruism and humor, the way that you deal with difficulties, essentially. And your background, or what happens to you, can dictate what sorts of defenses you use. So when we see people who rationalize or think in black and white, or will be giving without any expectation of getting anything back, those all arise for a reason. And the very best authors can give you characters who do those things and who interact with the world in that way and have it make sense with the context of their background. And I think that Robin Hobb does that so well. She has such a keen understanding of how people work, and it always works out. Even the chaos, the chaotic decisions that people make and the chaotic decisions that Fitz makes, they make sense for me within his character and his psychological makeup. And that's not always true. And this is where some books will lose me, is if characters make bad decisions, but they're bad decisions that don't fit that framework of the person that they are, or I have no context for why they would do that. Because people make bad decisions. Human beings make bad decisions. We make bad decisions all the time. But we also, whether we know it consciously or not, we have reasons that we make those decisions. There are things that happen.
So you would say that you feel specifically, we're talking about Robin Hobb, maybe Joe Abercrombie here, that the actions that they are displaying on page in the story line up with what we know about them in their heads and through their, like you said, backgrounds.
Yes. And I will keep this very vague and so that it's not spoilery, but there is a romantic relationship that Fitz engages in over the course of the novels. And sometimes you want to shake him and you're like, why are you doing this? Why are you interacting with this person in this way? Why are you making these decisions? And if you look at what has happened to him and what brought him to this point in his life, you can start to understand why he does those things. And to me, they make sense. They line up with the patterns that I have seen, because everyone is unique, and that's what keeps psychiatry interesting, is that you don't often see the same things repeated. But human beings are also predictable. We live out the same patterns over and over, which is why we get these stories that play out over and over, because there is, for better or worse, a human experience, and we all kind of follow that track, and you can at least start to make well intentioned guesses, I guess, is the best way to put it, for how people are going to react to certain situations.
Yeah, and you're talking about getting into patterns. I think everyone in their lives gets into patterns, whether it be a daily routine or even the way that we process things that happen to us. And before you know it, you're 30, 40 years old, and that's just who you are. When in fact, it is not who you are. It is a pattern of actions and thoughts and emotions that you are pretty much guaranteed to go through, because you just have never, you have to take like a step out of that timeline. You have to take a step out of that pattern. Mm-hmm. And I think whenever, one of the best most enlightening moments in the Fitz story, which I can't give because of spoilers, is a moment where he kind of steps back and he looks at that pattern. And it's really impactful. And also, I mean, that goes a long way in life too. I mean, there's times, some people say, I woke up and I had just had enough. And I feel like those moments are when we take a step back from that pattern and we break, and we're like, wow, I've been stuck in this forever.
And what Robin Hobb does in that instance, because I know what time you're thinking about, is that she also doesn't make it easy, because it's not. Recognizing that something is happening and then making changes or making steps to change that's not an easy process. And I think that's lots of people in books and in TV and media in general, they are getting better at portraying those difficult moments, those crossroads and those realizations. Mm-hmm. But then it just becomes like, oh, I understand. And now I can engage in therapy, or now I can get the help that I need. But that is step one on a very long journey that kind of goes forward. And I did see that with Fitz as well. It's not that he recognizes what's happening and then bam, it's fixed. It's, I recognize what's happening and I know that I have to take steps to do things differently if I want to move on from this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've always felt like Fitz is very relatable and very real. Andrew's Wizardly Read says Kyle is one of the worst characters in Realm of the Elderlings. Not even a bad person. He's just poorly written. I could not disagree more, my friend. I could not disagree more. He represents the Chalcidian culture, and it is our first introspective look of how that has impacted people who come from that territory. I can't go into any spoilers, but he's actually a massive piece of the Realm of the Elderlings world, and every decision he makes total sense when you think about the culture that he has come from. And also he's a terrible person because the Chalcidians are terrible people. Now, what I will say is the Chalcidians get a little bit more nuance later down the road, and I feel like it's something that Hobb could eventually go back to, because apparently she might write more in Realm of the Elderlings. It's unclear. I hope she does.
Or write something, at least. Just write more.
Yeah. God Emperor says, I honestly think the Readathons sounds the most interesting out of all the Realm of the Ability. Everyone dislikes it. I don't dislike it. I didn't like the first two books. I thought they were very meh. But as an entry with books 3 and 4, and then the impact it has on the entire narrative from all 16 books perspective, it's very good. And it has the best magic and lore out of the entire series. So.
And that's what's interesting, is that people like different things in fantasy, so they can take, that might be someone's favorite for those reasons. It's the nice thing about that, is that people enjoy different things and they will get different things out of different books.
Yeah, and this is all subjective, right? I mean, at the end of the day. And there's also things, I give Robin Hobb a lot of praise, but a lot of people don't care about prose or how well something's written, and that's totally fine. Like, I totally get that. That's totally fine. But for me personally, characterization and then, prose / writing quality, or whatever you want to call it, how you tell your story is very important to me. And also, I mean, prose is also subjective. Some people don't find that to be the most efficient way to tell a story. So at the end of the day, it's all in good fun, right? If you could get in the head, or rather maybe have a conversation and study a person that you've read, a character, who would your number one pick be?
We've already talked about Fitz, so I'll leave him aside. I would love to talk to Fitz. I would love to get inside his head. I've talked about Roland a lot from the Dark Tower as well. Character that I love, who I feel like changes and doesn't is the best way to put it. But a character that really impressed me, and this is not necessarily a series that I love, but a character that I found very impressive was Rin from the Poppy Wars series. And there were things that I really liked about that series, and there were things that I did not enjoy. But for a character who has undergone trauma, and to see the violent aspects of how that can be portrayed, I think that Rebecca Kuang did that brilliantly. And I think that's something that we gloss over a lot, because I think even when there's more acceptance, which happily is happening all the time, we have a lot more acceptance for mental illness in general, for depression, for anxiety. And what is hard to accept sometimes is that anger is a really big part of that. Anxiety and anger are very tightly bound. Trauma and anger are very tightly bound. And it's something that we avoid because we don't want our characters to be unlikable. And for a lot of people, what is more unlikable than anger? It's we have this societal expectation that you should never be angry. And I will say that I have met very few angry people who are not anxious because they have this anger has been suppressed their whole life. They haven't been allowed, or they haven't been able to display their emotions. They grew up in an environment where intense emotions were not tolerated, where they were punished or subdued because of the feelings that they were having. And you see this a lot so my area of expertise, or my area of interest, is child psychiatry. So you see this a lot in kids who have ADHD, for example, because they're very hyper, they're very energetic, they're on the go, they interrupt, they talk a lot. And because those things are seen as rude, as a society, both like in the familial sense, in school, everywhere, we try to like tamp them down. So they're like, we are essentially like constricting their feelings all the time. Yeah. And this comes out in temper tantrums and bouts of anger. And I think that Rin, because I just saw Alan's comment pop up, Rin is unlikable. I do not disagree. She is really unlikable, but she is realistically unlikable. And I think that she's a really interesting character. I think that Rebecca Kuang went places with her character that a lot of people are scared to go. And I think from her introduction to the very last paragraph of the very last novel, everything that she does and the journey she takes and the psychological changes that happen, they all make sense in terms of what she has gone through. And that's why I really appreciated that. I didn't know if I was going to like Poppy War. And even after the first book, I was very conflicted. I keep a book journal, and I think I wrote like 3 pages after I finished the first book, because I was so angry. I was like, this is really good, and I thought this sucked, and I had a lot of feelings about it. But Rin was always interesting. She needs a hug. She needed a hug when she was 3, but she's a really interesting character.
Yeah, just based on what and for people who don't know, Rin is the protagonist in the Poppy War trilogy. And just based on the reaction I see in chat of love and hate, that tells me that she is an interesting character. And I read the Poppy War, and I have a review for it on my channel. It's actually one of my least reviewed. Like I needed a haircut. I sat on my love seat. I didn't do any production on it, so people probably didn't want to watch it. But I was pretty mixed on it, I guess. Book 1 I didn't really like very much. I thought it ended really well. I really enjoyed book 2 and 3. But talking about Rin and her anger and everything, I never really cheered her on, but I was always interested to see how destructive she was going to be. And I always wanted to know. I don't necessarily would say I was rooting for it, but I was wanting to know if she would change. And that's kind of what led me through that series. And it's definitely not one of my favorite series of all time. I wouldn't list there. I think it's really good. See, when people hear that, though, they go, it's probably not worth reading. I actually think it is worth reading if you're into that idea. I'm not saying it's going to be for everyone, but she is different. You have to give her that. I mean, it's not your typical run-of-the-mill protagonist at all. And she is very dislikable. However, also the Asian history that's involved in it and the real inspection of events that happened in our world.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the most brutal moments of that series, which it is brutal,
It is.
were moments that actually happened in our history. It wasn't, obviously the magic does play a role in it, but some of just the atrocities that you have to read and come across in that book are really important, I think, to look at. And it made me more interested in that history. And I think that was her goal with writing that trilogy, and she accomplished it for me. So I have interesting feelings, I guess, about that trilogy. Like, it's not going to make my top, but I'm not mad that I read it at all. And whenever I think of interesting protagonists, Rin is definitely at the top of my list. I see tons of people just saying how much they hate Rin, and it's kind of funny to me.
She's easy to hate. It's not.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, she definitely is. But maybe people do, but there are lots of characters that I dislike in fantasy because I feel like nothing was done with them. I'm like, this is boring. This is bland. I've seen this a ton of times. All of the anger and all of the negative will I had toward Rin never came from me thinking that Rebecca Kuang did a poor job writing her.
Yeah. The history behind that series is fascinating. The Century of Humiliation for China, it is fascinating. Yeah, people are all... Yeah, and that's, I see a lot of people say, yeah, I like the history, I like the world, didn't like Rin, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, she's going to be divisive. There's no doubt about it. I would hope that at least be able to tip your hat to be like, well, she tried something different with a main character. I saw someone say, has Sarah done a character analysis of Logen Ninefingers? Would love to see that from her. You are a big fan of First Law, right?
I am, and Logan's my favorite character, so I do love him. I have actually been tossing around the idea, and I have this is one of the things I've been thinking about since I started the channel, was doing some character analyses. So picking some characters who I think would fit that mold very well and putting together maybe like a 10. So when we are tested, we're supposed to be able to formulate a patient in 10 minutes. That's part of our exam to finish psychiatry. So 10 minutes is my framework for that. I should be able to tell you what you need to know about somebody in 10 minutes. The basics. But I have been hoping to do some of those kind of 10-minute snapshots, and Logan would be one of the first people that I would want to do that with, because I think that he is a fantastic character. He wins out over Glokta, which is another one of my unpopular fantasy opinions.
Well, no, honestly, like when I think about like the legends of First Law, right? And actually the new trilogy gave me new favorites, to be honest. Like I would say Logan has been dethroned in the new trilogy, maybe by multiple characters. I'm not sure. We'll have to see how book 3 ends this fall. Are you all caught up, by the way?
Nope. So I'm reading Best Served Cold right now, and okay. I'm really liking it.
Yeah, it's a fun one, and then the Heroes is fantastic.
So I've heard.
But I always do go back to Logan. He's just so iconic. He's so I love Glokta too, and I think he's one of the more interesting characters in the genre. But man, Logen Ninefingers. If you had to do a 1-minute analysis, give me a little sneak peek. Give me 1 minute.
1 minute of Logan.
I'm not even really timing you. So.
I do think so. I actually have spent a little bit of time like lurking in people's conversations about Logan, and people go back and forth about whether or not they think. I don't know how much of this is spoilers either. This is what I'm always really cognizant of. The duality of Logan, whether or not that comes from, whether or not that's based in magic, based in anger, based in trauma. By virtue of my background, I have to think that thinking that people's base urges and the kind of the most violent parts of them are not influenced by other things that have happened in their life. So I do very much think that of Logan. And I think that adds a lot to the duality of his personality. And I think that we spend a lot of time convincing ourselves that Logan is on this journey to be a better person. But are we convinced of that? I don't know. That's something. Stay tuned.
Yeah, that is a great question, my friend. That is a great question. You could say that about a lot of people in the First Law universe, right?
Yeah.
One of the big complaints, and I'm kind of curious to see what you think. One of the big complaints that people have about First Law, and it's the thing I actually love about it the most, is that it's very nihilistic. Do you find it to be nihilistic?
I do. I do, but I like that about it.
I do too. I have always considered myself an active nihilist, where I believe the other is just is it traditional nihilist? There's or existential nihilist. Have you ever heard this philosophy?
So when I deal in nihilism, I tend to think of it in terms of how people approach, like I relate it back to mood and depression and how people see themselves and see their future, because a lot of what I do is assessing how people are doing and if they can go home from the hospital or they need to stay in the hospital. So I do see a lot of nihilism related to just changes in mood, and it's not their baseline, but philosophically, that aspect of nihilism versus existentialism versus all of those things that I am not as well versed in. I feel like I am not an expert in philosophy, but I will say that personally, that is a little bit scary for me. I find it hard to think about that. And I think that's what I like about First Law, is it challenges me to think about some things that are personally difficult. Because a lot of the things that people find comfort in, like religion, that is not a part of my personal life. And I feel like that leaves me a little bit in the lurch sometimes, because I'm like, oh, what do I have to have a grip on? And this is where kind of mindfulness and those types of things come in, learning to appreciate what is happening in the now instead of overthinking what is going to happen in the future, which is a trap that we can all kind of get caught in.
Yeah, I agree. Andrew's Wizardly Read says, I don't think it's that dark. And speaking of nihilism, well, so the interesting thing about First Law is people hear nihilism associated with, very dark themes or just being depressing, and I'm not going to say that not certain parts of the First Law aren't that, because they are. However, Joe's writing, he brings a lot of humor into it. And I think what he is proposing in First Law is active nihilism, which is something that I subscribe to, which is essentially to say that there's no point to anything. It all comes to an end, whatever. And some people find it normal nihilism. I think it's called existential nihilism is whenever that it like paralyzes you. You don't do anything. But you'll see all throughout First Law, people will be like, well, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this, Logan? And he's just like, because it's what we do. And it's almost like you are active. It makes you more active and more motivated because there are no reasons behind things. Sometimes it's a liberating thing. It's a very different way to look at things. And I would say I subscribe to that I guess, view on life if I had to put a label on it. But I think that's kind of what Joe's getting across. It's not nihilism in the fact that it's all for nothing and there's no reason to live or anything like that, but more so just saying, well, there's no point to anything, but we do what we do, and we do it because of that. And we got to play our role, because if we don't play our role, it all falls apart.
And we must imagine Sisyphus is happy. That's the role that we have to take. You do what you do, you live in the moment, and you don't think about your rock rolling back down the hill for you to push up all over again.
Yeah, not all characters are on a journey. Some are just traveling. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and Scott Baker's Prince of Nothing trilogy is on my TBR for this year, and I've heard that it's pretty dark. Like First Law's always talked about being grimdark, but it's kind of like the poster child. But it's actually, in my opinion, way lighter than that. But man, have I heard crazy things about Baker's work. I'm really excited to get to it.
I have a little bit of trouble with the grimmest story. So before I read First Law, this is also what I had heard is, oh, this is the poster child for grimdark. This is what is exemplary in the genre. And so that held me back from reading it for a little while. But I agree that Abercrombie inserts levity into the story that really takes away from that darkness. I find it a little bit difficult to get invested in characters when things are incredibly dark, when I have no hope for anything, because I guess it's protective for me, because I do get so attached to characters. Yeah. If it is so dark that I have no hope for anyone, then I feel like I can't get attached to anyone. I need to separate myself from them. And this is so we'll talk about my next unpopular fantasy opinion of the night. So the 5th book in the Red Rising series, Dark Age, it is my least favorite of all of them, which is funny because it's most people's favorite. Most people love it. And it's because I think that Pierce Brown has gotten to darkness for darkness's sake. And it made me pull away from the characters a little bit. And I didn't like that.
Interesting. And anybody in chat, please do not put any Red Rising spoilers. I am halfway through Golden Sun, and I'm having a good time. I'm getting exactly what I thought I would get out of Red Rising, which is a very fast-paced, entertaining, wild adventure. It's not even an adventure, it's just it's a story, and it is relentless, fast-paced, and just bloody entertaining. It's gory, bloody, whatever they say, entertaining.
Gory damn entertaining.
Yeah, and I'm having a really good time. Do you feel, obviously you don't feel this way, I assume. I hear a lot of people say they like the sequel series more than the original trilogy. You're not in that camp?
I do like the sequel trilogy, or the sequel, I guess the 2 books that are out so far. So first of all, I really love Red Rising. If anybody has not been on my channel, I do love it. So I don't want to me, it is one of my favorite series of all time. My favorite book is probably Golden Sun. I still think that that's my favorite of all of them. I think that Dark Age, the 5th book, has some of the strongest moments of the series. Some of my favorite things that happen in the 5th book, but I found the pacing to be erratic. They get bigger because as you get more successful, people don't edit you as much. They let you do what, they let you have free reign over your story, which can be good. But I personally felt like Dark Age was a little bloated. There were places where the pacing slowed down, and then there were places where I had to sit there and read it all quickly because I was so invested. But it gets progressively darker. And if you really like that, then I think that you will really love Dark Age. But when I appreciate grimdark stories, what I appreciate out of them is a sense of realism, is feeling grounded in a story, feeling like I can understand the characters and understand that there are stakes. And there were moments that happened in Dark Age that I felt like were meant to shock or disturb us, but I don't like feeling manipulated by an author. I don't like feeling like someone intentionally set out to make me
cringe.
Yeah, cringe. And I felt like Pierce Brown was doing that a little bit in Dark Age. And maybe he was just flexing because his books do get progressively darker, and maybe he's just flexing those muscles because that's the type of story that he likes to write. But it just didn't land for me. And I know that for most people it did. And I do appreciate some parts of that book very much. And I am really, really excited for the final book. I think he becomes a better author as time goes by. I think he has a higher command of his story. His world building just improves and improves. So I can see the places where he's improving. But it just, like, to my personal taste, it didn't really fit it that well.
Interesting. I can say, so I read Red Rising this week, and now I'm in the Golden Sun. His prose is much better in book 2. I was so impressed by that level up. However, and this is not a popular opinion, I don't think, I am getting about the same amount of enjoyment from Red Rising and Golden Sun. Now, to be fair, I'm only halfway through Golden Sun, but that's not a downer because I actually liked Red Rising. Even though I hate the perspective, first person present, no one should ever pick it. It's terrible. Yeah. That's just my opinion. Like, ooh. Love triangles and first person present. Man, I hate them. But even with all that, and even with his writing, being a little rough around the edges, I would say maybe in book 1, it still wasn't terrible. Like, I would never be like, oh, book 1 was awfully written or anything like that. It's just book 2's way better in prose, in my opinion. Felt like he really opened up with his writing, and someone said in my Discord today, felt like that he opened up the world a lot more with book 2, and I like that a lot. But I actually like the battle royale setting. I thought that was really neat, and I'm getting about the same amount of enjoyment from Golden Sun, which is like really good. So I'm not saying like, oh, I didn't like book 1 and I didn't like book 2. It's just, even though there's a clear level up to book 2, I was having fun in book 1. I'm still having fun in book 2. I don't know if I'm necessarily emotionally attached to any of the characters. I really like Severo.
Yes, I love Severo.
And Mustang are really awesome. And Darrow gets a lot of flack as a protagonist. Like, I know Jake's in the chat. Oh, he was in the chat. He doesn't like Darrow, I don't think. He thinks he's like fine. I think he's a little better than fine. It's hard for me to go from 16 books and most of those being first person perspective from Fitz to going to another first person perspective with an author trying to start out. That's really hard. But I don't know. I'm having a good time, but I can definitely see how you're saying he like levels up and whatnot. I can see that even from book 1 to 2, and I'm excited to continue the series. I mean, Red Rising is wild. It's really wild.
And he's so good. I like him most when he's being over the top. Like I don't know if the Telemonises have been in it much yet, but I love that family. All the characters there are great. It's when Pierce Brown is allowing himself to be kind of bombastic and over the top is when the series really lands for me. I really like that. I really enjoy Severo. Severo is definitely my favorite character of the bunch of them. I always like those little gremlin characters when you know they're surrounded by all these beautiful people and you have this like strange little gremlin there. I usually am attached to those characters.
Yeah. Yeah, there's Jay. He says Darrow is fine. Yeah, I don't know.
Agree. I agree that Darrow's fine.
I mean, I'm not going to put him on my top list or anything, but like, I guess it depends on how you're using the word fine, because sometimes fine comes across like, oh, he's fine, you know, pinky up. Yes, quite. Or if it's, oh, he's fine. Like, I would give him that kind of fine. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, me too.
A lot of really good quotes in the series. Yeah, definitely some really good quotes, some really good moments. He also really knows how to set up those big moments, and especially his combat in Golden Sun is much better than book one, in my opinion. And I love the chaos. I do. Oh, Darren, thank you so much for the 10 spot there. You got Sarah on the chat. Would love to hear both of your thoughts on Grimdark as a whole and what it actually means to you. Sarah, I would love for you to go first on this.
Yeah, so as I said before, so there are some things I really love about Grimdark. What I think Grimdark brings to fantasy is that lens that we can use to look at the world and understand the darker parts of it. And I feel like you can't love Stephen King as much as I do and not appreciate the darker parts of life. I don't like, and I have never liked my entire life, this idea that the world is rosy and happy all of the time. I am just as drawn to that romantic notion of fantasy as the rest of us. I mean, there's got to be a hint of romanticism in you if you like fantasy, because it is a romantic genre. It is, and I don't mean romance as in like a relationship between two people. I mean that sense of idealism that can permeate fantasy sometimes. But what I think Grimdark does, and what like George R. R. Martin did in particular, is that he took a very familiar narrative and he gave us a different lens by which to examine those types of worlds. I think that it made the experience of reading characters and following fantasy characters much richer, because we were finally able to see what happened when the darker parts of their personalities came in, when we could finally see that darker undercurrent of humanity, which has been in the horror genre for a long time, but I felt like you had that was in very niche pockets, and people did do that. So you did have like Thomas Covenant and some of those front runners of grimdark fantasy, but obviously Martin brought that onto a global scale and made people recognize that this was kind of the new frontier of fantasy and what we could do with fantasy when we strip down those purely romantic pieces and open ourselves up to a much more nuanced and much more complex story. And that is what I like, is that I think that it is a great avenue to open up that nuance and give us some of that complexity that you crave. And I love classic fantasy. I love heroic fantasy. It's really easy to get behind a hero. I love it for the same reasons that I love anime. Like it's good to like cheer on your hero and have those big battles and watch them triumph. But I think Grimdark gives us that complexity that we seek sometimes in fantasy. And that's personally why I gravitate toward it. Yeah.
I mean, I agree with all these reasons that Sarah's listed. I think Grimdark is very tricky. I think it's very tricky as a sub-genre. I don't know if I believe in that genre anymore. And the reason why is because if you were to talk about Grimdark, I mean, there are some things. It's interesting because some of even the books now that be considered more closer to the traditional fantasy and happy, even now, for you to have a what we considered a very nuanced work, you have to include grim dark aspects. And I think what grim dark gets confused with a lot of times are a couple things: low fantasy, a lot of swearing, boobs and blood. And I feel like these are the things we see that in a book and we go, whoa, wait, is this grim dark? For me, I guess what grim dark means to me is just overall like diving in to the psyche. It's way more about the mental aspect of what's happening in the story and the damage that it's causing. Poppy Wart is a very good example of grimdark. This is where I get a little lost with this subgenre. How is Realm of the Elderlings not considered grimdark? I have no idea. Some of the things and traumas that happen in that series are so bleak. I mean, it's the first time something's happened in a story where I had to actually, I just put the book down. I was like, okay, that was awful. Like, that was so bad. It was so well done, but I'm like, it is so traumatic that I have to kind of do something else for a bit. So that's my question. Like, what is it just because you want to market your book as grimdark? And if that is, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that, but it's hard to really define that, right? And a lot of people would say, Sarah, and I don't agree with them, but a lot of people say, oh, Song of Ice and Fire, not grimdark. I'm like, I think it is.
And if you compare it to what is being published now, if you take those, like some of these new series that do, it's like extreme darkness. I don't know if this was in Alan's when he covered tropes, but he was talking about grimdark in one of his videos. Maybe it was when he was talking to you and he was talking about, I'm going to use their rib cage as a toboggan. And it's all the way to the top. If you compare it to that, then no. But I think he definitely opened the door for grimdark to be an accepted avenue to publish in fantasy.
Yeah, I guess that's my question. Is it just to have that marketing niche where you're saying, hey, this is what you're going to get? Like, if you're reading this is going to be extraordinarily mature. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of grimdark fantasy is low fantasy. And I like low fantasy a lot. I'm in it for the lightning bolts and the cantrips and all that good stuff, right? Mm-hmm. I love all that stuff, but I tend to have my favorite books come from more of a low fantasy setting. Happens to be a lot of what people would consider to be grimdark to be a part of that that grouping. After reading The Unholy Consult, barely anything qualifies as grim. Yeah, there's some books out there that are just absolutely wild. And Darren, again, I want to thank you for the question, and obviously thank you so much for the super chat. I really, really appreciate it. It's always wild to me when I get anything like that. Yeah, it's interesting though, because I feel like grimdark now is what I don't want grimdark to become. Is I don't want it to become a race or a competition of who can gross me out the most. Or who can offend me the most, right? And I feel like you're saying that you feel like kind of like Red Rising's maybe entered that territory a little bit.
I just think there were a couple of moments where I felt more emotionally manipulated than emotionally invested. And that could, that's a personal experience. So I don't know if that's necessarily I don't think that's what Pierce Brown was going for. I don't think anyone sets out to do that, but I think it's a learning curve. It's a bump. There's a lot of subtlety that goes into writing those types of stories, and it can come off differently for different people. But I think that's what turns a lot of people off from things like love triangles, because you mentioned that earlier too, is you don't want this sense of being emotionally manipulated. And can people in life love multiple people at the same time, or can they be confused, or can they be conflicted? Yes, that can happen. And it can be really realistic, and it can be really raw, and it can be really intense. But what we're given in stories is often this obvious emotional manipulation where we are told that we have to feel a certain way about various characters. Mm-hmm. And I don't like that. I rebel against that. I hate feeling like the author is putting me in that position. And I had a conversation with Alan on Voxer about edgelord characters, because he talks about edgelords a lot and how he doesn't like them. But it's the same idea is when you're being told that this character is dark and brooding, and they're not like everybody else, and you gotta like them because they're cool and they've been through stuff, they've been through trauma. Then you're like, ugh, get that away from me. Like, this is you want to make me feel a certain way, and all it's doing is making me feel irritated. Yeah,
there's definitely like a line that you have to toe whenever you're giving that background, and like you said, creating that framework in which we can identify what this character's been through. That is one interesting thing about Malazan and Gardens of the Moon and Steve Erickson's indirect characterization, is I feel like I'm earning that framework in a way, because I'm having to take it from subtle hints of context clues of the way the characters are interacting with each other and the world, and what they feel based on what someone just said to them. It's really interesting. And I feel like whenever I get to know a character, I get to know them in Gardens of the Moon so far. Again, I'm only halfway through, but when I've become a little bit more acquainted with these characters, it's like, oh, I really know them. You know what I mean? It's kind of like when you meet somebody and they're not opening up, and then when you finally get that wedge in the door and they open up to you, it means a whole lot more.
Mhm.
That's kind of what indirect characterization has been for me so far in Malazan. I'm really curious to see what you think.
And think about life. Like, some people are open books. They will share with you their experiences, know, based on your interactions with them, what kind of person they are, how they react to things. And some people are much more closed off, and it takes time to delve into that. So I have heard that Stephen Erickson is an excellent author. He seems very smart from all the things that I have read about him, interviews, etc. Maybe that's the problem.
There's sometimes where he's like really mysterious on purpose. Like, instead of saying the character, like, oh, it's her, and you're like, just say the name, bro. Like, I'm already lost. You don't have to rub my nose in it.
You've outsmarted me already. You don't need to work this hard.
Yeah, I stubbed my toe and then you kicked me in the shin. Like, you're a dick, you know? Just say what you mean.
Yeah. And this has been one. So that is actually my biggest fear about Malazan, is I never know, based on, because I've watched a lot of people talk about this series, and I always wonder, do you love this because it challenges you and makes you feel like you're working hard and you're getting smarter just by virtue of reading it? Or do you like it because it's enjoyable? I like to have a good time, and I don't know what the answer is there.
You know what? That's what I'm trying to figure out right now. And there's a sense of accomplishment every time I finish a chapter, and if I caught something, like whenever I look at like, if I'm confused on one part and I read like a recap and they tell you exactly what happened, I go, oh, I caught that. Like, there is a sense of accomplishment to it. You know what I would relate it to? And I don't know if you play any video games at all. Have you ever heard of Dark Souls?
My husband plays a lot of video games, so I've seen most of them played, but I don't play. So yes, I have seen him play Dark Souls.
Okay, so Dark Souls is an incredibly frustrating game that is marketed as a very difficult game. However, if you talk to anyone, including myself, I say it's actually not that difficult. There's just rules in which that you have to play within. Like, you just have to figure it out, and then once you figure it out, it's a good time. Like,
it's fine.
Yeah, Dark Souls went from being a game that I would play that would stress me out to now I kind of chill when I play. I mean, I still get mad sometimes, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not a task that turn on Dark Souls.
I've gamed the system.
Yes. Yeah. You're like, I figured it out. That is how I kind of relate Dark Souls and Malazan in the same vein. I get the same almost completion euphoria whenever I finish a chapter, and I'm like, man, I made it through that. That was really good. There's undoubtedly things about it that I'm enjoying, like, just flat out for what it is on the page, very much enjoying it. It is the highest fantasy I think I've ever read in my life, which I just told you I'm not a huge high fantasy person. I didn't realize how high it's actually so high that I appreciate the absurd, like how absurd it is. Like, in the first chapter, there's like 2 portals, and you're like, what? And then, like, they can delete like 20,000 people in a minute, and you're just like, wow. So you're really inspecting the macro. Like, me and you, we talk about, we like getting into micro. Joe Abercrombie puts you in the middle of a death pit in the middle of a war, and he jumps POVs, and that's really cool. Well, this is like, you zoom out, and surprisingly, there's a lot of humanity in those decisions that people make, and that's what I'm seeing with Malazan. It's fascinating. It's different. It's very different.
I'm looking forward to it. I am. It has always intimidated me, but I am looking forward to starting.
Yeah, and actually, God Emperor said, I read Malazan mostly endings. Honestly, the word of that is a slog. I could see that, especially with some of the longer ones, but the world building is insane. So I've always said, like, a couple of things authors can do to become one of my favorite authors is word choice mattering, and subtle hints at world building, lore, all that stuff. And Erickson's already done that in book 1. It maybe even so much so that maybe I didn't like it as much as I thought I did. Where it's like, oh God, like, you're telling me I didn't read that sentence in the right way, and now I'm, I had no idea what this was happening. He says, exactly, yes, it's over the top ridiculous. You actually respect the imagination. Yeah, Philip Chase says that I wish I could remember the exact. I want to say he said Tolkien gave birth to his imagination and Erickson baptized him or something like that. And I understand. Someone asked this Malazan. Yeah. Yes, to your question about Malazan. I say Malazan and Malazan interchangeably. I also feel like there's nothing I've ever read, and I read through the books and look back and have residual thoughts on what I just read. Yeah. It's definitely like a lot of context clues and having to draw conclusions from, like, again, a word, which is wild. I'm upset that if someone has them last where I'm reading something that I'm told I won't get till you read, so I'm reading the book and that I won't understand for 5 years. That was my big question to Petrick. Petrick and me have talked a lot about Malazan, and I said, listen, if I read these 10 books, am I going to know what happened? And he said, yes, but there will be things that you will not understand. Like, there will be things that you have missed. But he told me that if I read them, I will understand the overarching story. That's all I need.
You're good with that.
Yes. I mean, at the very minimums, I need that. You know what I'm saying? And then there's other check boxes it's going to have to hit as I go through these 10 bricks that could, hold up my house. But as long as that happens, that would be fine. Yeah. Tolkien baptized imagination. Erickson set it free. Okay.
There we go.
I didn't want to misquote the doctor. It's not as badly confused as some people say. Yeah, I don't think it's as bad as I thought it would be. But there are parts that are definitely confusing. And a lot of it is with the context being so ambiguous. Alex Nevea said it's like joining a D&D session, D&D game 10 sessions in, and I think that's about as perfect of an explanation as I could ever give.
You just got to do some catch up.
Yeah, and we kind of mentioned Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, and I was watching a while back your favorite series videos, and your number one is Lord of the Rings still to this day. I was kind of curious because I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. I like Tolkien. I got to be in the mood to read it, but I do love it. Why is it that Lord of the Rings in 2021 is still your favorite series of all time?
I think the most truthful answer to that is that I am a victim of nostalgia. I find it really hard to let go of the things that I loved early in my life. I feel like, for me, there's always this push and pull between Dark Tower and Lord of the Rings, because if we go on enjoyment, The Dark Tower probably is my favorite fantasy series of all time. It is the one that I love reading the most. It is the one, like that question, if you could only bring one series to an island, that's what I would bring. That's the thing that I would want to have be the last book that I ever read.
Wow.
But I cannot let go of the fact that The Lord of the Rings is what made me a fantasy fan, and being a fan of fantasy is one of the biggest parts of my life. It has had a huge influence on my life. I like the way that Tolkien's exploration of language and the language that he created for his world and inserted in his world helped set me on the path that I took early in life. So I studied French literature, language and literature and linguistics before medical school, actually, which is a strange path to get to medical school.
Yes, it is.
But that was my first love always. I had thought for a long time that I was going to do my PhD, and just in terms of being sensible, I didn't know how feasible that was for the future. And I did some electives in like organic chemistry and stuff so I could write the MCAT, which is not even the question you asked. But I feel like Lord of the Rings set me on a path, and it influenced so many of the things that I came to love. And it is the foundation of the kind of reader that I am, of the kind of person that I am, the things that I liked. And I cannot extricate it from myself. So I cannot take it out and separate it from myself as a child, myself as a teenager. And so in terms of enjoyment, probably it isn't the fantasy book that I enjoy the most. The series I probably enjoy the most is The Dark Tower. And I talked about this too. Like when I read The Dark Tower, I felt like it was written for me. I felt like all of the things that I love were there, but I feel like The Lord of the Rings helped shape me. And that's why I can't let it go out of that spot. And I don't know if I ever will. There's probably going to be other series that I read that I love just as much, but I don't know if I could ever shift that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's not the answer maybe that you were looking for.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. I think we have revelations and there's like a jumping point. And then for some of us, and I think a lot of people in chat would probably agree, there's like a rebirth almost. I'm with you. Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings absolutely shaped me. And then A Song of Ice and Fire changed everything. It changed everything for me. That a story could be told. It kind of like how you said, the lens in which we go through these events. And I just remember being like, wow. And this is probably not a popular opinion, but George's world building blew me away. And I know a lot of it's based on historical things and what I love history. So it checks so many boxes for me. And if it wasn't for A Song of Ice and Fire, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I wouldn't have this channel. I would have saved a lot of money because I wouldn't have all these books back here. And in a lot of ways, that has shaped me in my second, launching into adult fantasy. So A Song of Ice and Fire for me is that kind of what you're saying. Like, I don't know how a series is ever going to dethrone it. All I can really say is that my number 2 spot is also super prestigious. And for me, if I had to be sent on an island, man, it'd be a tough. It'd be between Realm of the Elderlings and A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm still. People have been asking me, do you like it more than Song of Ice and Fire? And it's just like, give me some time.
I do have a question. So this gets talked about a lot, about A Song of Ice and Fire and its ending and the books coming. Do you find it hard to love something so much that you might not ever get the ending to?
No, I don't care. I am one of these people that, I want the books. Like, anyone that says they don't want the books is silly, right? Or jaded, one of the two. But I don't necessarily care if it ever gets ended. It doesn't bother me. And
doesn't
I know
detract from the love that you have for those books.
And that is what I've told people forever, is the fact that, okay, let's say George comes out tomorrow and says, I'm not finishing these books and no one's allowed to finish them. It's over. Okay. Does that affect A Song of Ice and Fire where it stands in the all-time greatest series in the fantasy genre? Yes. Does it change the experience I had reading those 5 books and then the extended books of, like Dunk and Egg, and then I've read a little bit of Fire and Blood? No, doesn't change it at all. Doesn't change the heart-pounding moments of A Storm of Swords, which in my opinion is the best fantasy book ever. Nothing changes. Nothing changes for me. Now, here's a question that I have to ask myself. Well, do you continue to pour time into this? That's a good question. My answer is yes and no, probably a little bit. But like as of today, I think I watch or read some portion of A Song of Ice and Fire content every single day of my life. The subreddit, World of Ice and Fire, I'll crack open Fire and Blood. I'm planning on doing a Fire and Blood read along in the new year. And then I'm doing a read along with Leanna's Library and Alex Nevaez in October. We're going to do 1 book a month for A Song of Ice and Fire reread. Here it is. There's some people who say, some people don't get it. They don't like it. And that's totally cool. For me, it's undoubtedly one of the greatest experiences in my life. In my life, reading those books was just awe-inspiring. I like that world. I like it. I would like to live in it. I want to be a hedge knight. I want to be with Sir Duncan the Tall.
This is the first thing I have not agreed with that you've said today. You'd like to live there. That sounds like a horrible idea.
Well, I am a nihilist, so I'm ready for the darkness and the pain. But literally, just thinking about hitting the Riverlands and getting on my horse and being a hedge knight and pledging my sword where it's needed in the realm. That's that nerd shit. That's a nerd shit. Like when people, I used to remember when I was younger, I would see people dressed up as stormtroopers and stuff, and I'd be like, why would you ever do? I get it. Okay, I get it. And a lot of this comes from the fact that whenever I was a professional wrestler, when you're a wrestler, it is not acceptable to be a mark, is what they call it in the business, or mark out for anything. So I spent 8 years of my life not being allowed to be impressed by anything and not being able to admit I was a fan of anything. Like as a wrestler, and this is a little bit different than it used to be in wrestling, but whenever I came up in the business, it was very much like, you don't wear a wrestling shirt out. You don't say, oh, John Cena's awesome. Like, you don't do any of those things because you're a part of the business, right? Which is very weird because reading authors love talking about the other authors they love and what they're
Mm-hmm.
reading and stuff. Wrestling was very different. So I spent 8 years not being able to be really a fan of something I loved at the time. I don't really have any affiliation with wrestling now or really any love for the business anymore. But I came out of that and I was like, it was like something I had to break mentally. I was like, it's okay to get lost. It's okay to get wrapped up in something. And let's be honest. I mean, the books are phenomenal. And I know everyone has opinions about the show, but the show, the first 4 seasons, are the best television ever made. And all the merchandise that came out, all the banners in my background.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could live and breathe in this world. I know what happened at the Twins 900 years ago. I know this history. It is breathing in me. And for me, and that's a lot of people feel this way about Middle Earth and what Tolkien has done.
Yes.
And I think there is so much potential for me to become an even bigger Tolkien fan as I get older, because every time I reread his books, they get better for me.
Mm-hmm.
But Martin is the one that just captured me. It was like, it's okay to be a fan. It's okay to nerd out. It's okay to let your guard down. It's okay to get lost. And for me, that's why this series is so important. And that's why I don't care if it gets finished, because it played an important role in the transition of my life where I went from being in the starlight to just being a watcher. And that is a very hard thing to overcome whenever all you've ever known is to be judged by your performance in front of people and to act stoic and to not be a part of the crowd. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of, I could go into an hour-long discussion about how much it means to me, but that's why Westeros and George R. R. Martin, and that's why you see all the shit in my background. It's just, it is a part of me. And that it's also like one of those things. I don't have a ton of Song of Ice and Fire content on my channel because I'm not super interested in the other takes that I'll you know what I mean? Like, yes. I'm so close to it that like whenever I want to talk, so I said this with my patrons the other night in the hangout for all my Kingsguard members, but I'm so close to it that I go to a different community for that. Like I don't even booktube, like I don't, in A Song of Ice and Fire almost don't mix with me. I go to, there's a podcast I love listening to called Bend the Knee, and they have an amazing community, and I go exist in that realm when I want to talk A Song of Ice and Fire, because it's not a whether or not I think it's good or whether I like it. Those conversations are not interesting to me anymore. The conversation that interests me is like, oh, like, is Manderley, one of the most important characters going into the Winds? Oh, okay, yeah. So I'm just so into it. I'm
at that higher level of criticism. It's very interesting that this was your first brush with, like, the first time that you were able to really engage in fandom. And I think that is part of why I still love the Lord of the Rings so much, is that was my introduction to that. But it was when I was a kid. Like, that's when I was my first brush with Lord of the Rings or Tolkien's world was when I was 5. That's when I had The Hobbit read to me.
Wow.
And then I went from there. So my dad read it to me, and I cried and cried and cried when it was over, because it was sad, and also because I wanted more. And he told me that I wasn't old enough to read The Lord of the Rings. And I have this very vivid memory of being 5 and sneaking into my parents' room and taking The Lord of the Rings off the shelf and opening it and being like, damn it, like, you're right, I'm not old enough to read it. And I would go back and back until I felt like I could finally read it, and then was able to read that. And my very first, like, fandom engagements were, this is before I was even old enough to have a computer at home. I joined a Lord of the Rings fan site and wrote Lord of the Rings poetry.
Those were the days.
Online.
I used to, I wrote a column back in the day. I was a huge wrestling fan back, obviously. And I used to write columns. I lied about my age in an email and had my mom help me type the email. I don't know if my mom's watching, she might remember this. I wrote a column for prowrestling.com. At the time, the biggest professional wrestling website. I was writing columns at like, I was 13 or 14 years old. I might not have been that old, but kind of the same thing. Yeah. Getting online and in our age group, like, that was the first exposure to the internet. And it's like, fandoms became even bigger.
So good. I would use it for every, like, school assignment. So I have, I've sent these to Patrick. He's the only person who has seen, like, all of these hilarious things, but I have a bunch of Lord of the Rings poetry that I wrote when I was like 11 or 12, because my parents kept all of that kind of stuff.
No.
So So embarrassing, so hilarious, but it's and that's all that nostalgia. It all builds up until you can't get rid of it.
Dude, yeah, those experiences and those things definitely play a role in how much we enjoy a series. And then it's not fair for the things that come after.
No.
You know what I mean? But that's why we always have to take with a grain of salt that it is subjective. And it's
Yeah.
personal experience. Sometimes we
Mhm.
lose that a little bit. I think when we have conversations and people have disagreements, I see people. I mean, I'll poke fun at friends if they say something, but I see people all the time. Oh, I think Martin's a hack and he took history and made it. Okay, that's fine. It's all good.
You're entitled to that opinion. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't bother me. You know what I mean? Like it is solidified in my life. Jake says, I got to head out. This was really great, Sarah. I found your talk about psychology of Hobb characters in general incredibly fast, but I would love for character deep dives from you. Yeah, I think everybody, Sarah, would really appreciate if you went ahead and made those videos. Thanks.
They will happen.
Yeah. I think that's it, though. You know what Lord of the Rings is to you. Like that opinion probably isn't going to change much. It might evolve into more. And that's kind of how I feel with the Song of Ice and Fire, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard to separate yourself from the things that you truly, truly love.
Yeah. Also, some of the songs from A Song of Ice and Fire that have been inspired. Jenny from Old Stones. Dude, when I'm in the car alone, I turn on a little Florence the Machine, Jenny Old Stones, and listen, you can say whatever you want about TV show. Those soundtracks, son, they're so good. I literally think about Rhaegar and Summerhall, and I feel like I'm there, and I think good art inspires other art, and some of the art that we have that I love, like Joe Abercrombie and such, that have been inspired by Tad Williams and George R. R. Martin. Man, some of my favorites. Like I wouldn't have some of my other favorites. It wasn't for my favorite.
Exactly.
Incredible.
Exactly. And that is so. There's kind of a revisionist history now of the Game of Thrones show, which speaks to how much people really rebelled against that last season. But people forget, or they don't want to remember what it actually felt like to watch those first, like you said, 4 or 5 seasons come out and follow it and watch it grow. It was a phenomenon.
I'm telling you, the further we get away from that, I'm so glad that we're just getting back to talking about the books and the fandom. Even on my channel, I've seen it. People who 6 months ago were telling me, I'm done with it, and they're like, yeah, I might read Fire and Blood with you. And that to me is very encouraging, and it also speaks volumes for the origin material, like the original material, to overcome mistakes that were made in the post material adaptation. I think it speaks volumes to the impact of what the original stuff had on people.
So how do you feel about them doing a prequel television series?
Oh, it's awesome. Why not? I mean, here's the thing. I'm gonna watch it. And also one thing, I see this all the time. People are like, oh, D&D, how did it get? No, D&D are not involved. And everything other than D&D in their writing was fine. There was nothing wrong with the score. It's the best score in television history. The actors did their jobs very well. I mean, they were given kind of crap scripts, but all the good parts that we loved and some of the best episodes, the people who directed and produced those episodes, including George R. R. Martin, are working on this prequel. We know the section of Fire and Blood it's going to cover. We know what the ending is going to be. It's all laid out, and now they get to adapt it. And the thing that people forget about George is George wrote for TV a ton. He wrote for Twilight Zone. He is a TV guy. He likes making TV shows. And he signed this one specifically because I think he has things that he wants to play out on screen. And for spoiler reasons, I won't go into that. However, all of the good stuff, literally all of the good stuff that made that show amazing is coming back, minus the cesspool that was D&D's pens. Like, they're not going to be there. So I'm fine with it. And who doesn't? I mean, for me, I love history and I love Westeros. So it kind of goes hand in hand.
So why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you love this?
Yes.
I do feel like because there's a lot of pushback on George R. R. Martin in particular, and Patrick Rothfuss too, I guess, because of their unfinished series. And people use them working on other projects as ways to prove that they're not invested in their story. But if we try to empathize with the situation that they're in a little bit. To me, I would hope that getting involved with something that feels like it's a passion for you could only improve the other aspects of your life. Like if you think about in your own life, the things that you like I will say for me, like exercise, working out, when I'm able to do that, the other parts of my life are better. So you would think that if they're able to engage in a project that they like and that they're passionate about and that they're feeling good about, how could that not help them more than locking themselves in a room surrounded by this fear of failure, trying to work on the thing that has been eluding them for so long? So I try to look at it in that positive way. Not that I'm trying to say that they owe anybody anything, but I try to frame it in that perspective. Like if they are able to have this really positive part of their life, then maybe that will make the other things easier.
Yeah, I think it's just embrace, kind of washing yourself, just constantly exposing yourself to something that you're passionate about usually leads to good things. Lost in Discovery, what? He said, I'm more excited for Game of Thrones prequel than Wheel of Time. I mean, I am too, because I have a strong passion for A Song of Ice and Fire, and I don't for Wheel of Time. Someone said I'm more excited for Wheel of Time. See, one thing that I think we should all think about is it doesn't have to be House of the Dragon versus anything. That is only going to hurt one or the others. You know what I mean? And I could go on and on about who I think that hurts more, but I won't to save everyone's ears. But I really do think that the prequels have a lot of stuff that could be great. Some of the scenes that will play out on screen will be insane, insane, because we know the history of it. Well, I was just going to ignore the praise, but Jimmy's persuasive. I might just have to watch it. Yeah, you're risking nothing by doing it. The biggest issue with the show, everyone knows, was D&D and them cashing out, and they're not involved. If you liked everything else about the show, you're going to get that, So, I mean, it's all irrelevant when First Law gets adapted. I'll tell you what.
Let's live the dream.
Speaking of adaptations, Red Rising needs an adaptation. Holy crap. I mean,
I would like to see it as an anime, personally. I think it would
really
work really well. Yeah.
I think anime lends itself a lot of fantasy stuff. Honestly, I was talking to my wife about this today, and talking about different stories that I think would be adapted in one way or another. And I was kind of going over. It's something Lost in Discovery does not agree with me on, but I was thinking about how Stormlight would probably be best adapted as an anime. And I know he's like punching his screen right now. And I was just thinking about like 10 books. And we have 20 or 30 more years till it's done. And then a live adaptation television show, like you'd have to worry about so many recastings and so many characters that are important that you can't cut out. Like it's very interesting. But yeah, I you know what, now that you mention, I think I could see Red Rising as an animated series. I actually do.
I think what you need when you're thinking of something that's going to be an anime adaptation, you think about like how difficult is the world building going to be to do live action versus in an animated style.
Yeah.
There's a lot in Red Rising. There's a lot of those high octane battle sequences that I can just imagine animated with that type of soundtrack behind it, with all those, those big moments. And the soliloquizing, there's so much of that from Darrow. He likes a good speech every now and then. I think that lends itself to anime really well too, because there is a lot of that exposition.
That's true. And Pierce Browdy was like, the character will say, "Oh, here he goes." Like Darrow loves to make it about drama. So Darren, thank you so much for the 5 spot. And we're kind of talking about it now. I think we both agree Red Rising would be amazing. And I would, of course, love to see First Law. Oh, I would love to see First Law. Is the House of the Dragon about the Dance of Dragon? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. We're going to see some ridiculous scenes play out on screen that will be as impactful possibly as things like the Red Wedding and the end of season 1. I mean, we're going to see some... Martin's a messed up dude, Dallas, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Thanks for doing streams like this. I'm sub to both of you guys. Love your content. Thanks, Dallas.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Yeah, Sarah's one of the most well-spoken people on the platform, and I just love the experience that you have in your life that you bring into the booktube community. I don't feel like I know anybody that talks like you or has opinions like you, and you've shared some of your unpopular opinions tonight, some of which I don't even agree with, but I see your point. And obviously it's fun to go back and forth about.
It is. It is. I this is what I always try to tell Patrick, because he's, like the nicest person on booktube, but he has some like very intense opinions about certain things. I was like, this is your best stuff. Like the book reviews that I read where you're just spitting angry. I'm like, people need to hear more of this. Come on, let it out.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, Patrick is the nicest guy, and he does have some dissenting opinions that I share about certain massive series. And one day the Taviran boys, me, Lost Discovery, and Patrick are going to get on a stream, and we're just going to let it all hang out. Yeah, hearing Patrick on the Wheel of Time is the next. Yeah, I would agree. Stuart says, love the Dance of Dragons video on YouTube with art narrated by Game of Thrones actors. It is so good. Sarah, if you have not seen it,
I have not. You'll have to link it so I can watch it.
Stuart, if you have it, go ahead and put the link in the chat. It is phenomenal. It is so good. I would love to. Let's see. Oh no, there we go. I would love to see the Great Tales of Middle Earth in singular movies. That would be really cool. Also, just if all I know the Hollywood producers are out. Michael Bay is a big fan of mine. And they're watching right now. Not everything has to be a trilogy.
No.
The new Dune movie looks sick. It might end up being a monumental moment in cinema. Like, that's how good this thing looks. And they're already saying, well, we need money for part 2. And I'm like, maybe we don't need a part 2.
Maybe we can just leave it. Let it
And here's
be.
the thing. I'm reading Dune for the first time next month. I know there's other books. I know there's a thing. But like, man, it might have been. I'm hoping that the movie ends in a way where I can have some closure just in case 2 doesn't pan out.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Have you read Dune?
I have not. So I also have it slated for next month. So I think a lot of people are reading it in preparation for the movie. But I haven't watched the long trailer because my husband has read Dune, and he said if I want to be surprised by the book, to not watch the 3-minute trailer, because he feels like there are some moments that I might appreciate if I read them first.
Okay, well that's fair. I mean, there were definitely things happening in the trailer, but I didn't have any context. So, and I was just like spazzing. I was like, oh my God, this is so sick. And the music is phenomenal. Apparently Hans Zimmer, is that his name? The guy who's doing the score, or is it Van Zimmer? I can't remember. Someone tell me in the chat when I'm wrong. But apparently he created new instruments to make the score for Dune because he wanted it to sound futuristic.
Wow.
Dude, I mean, come on.
And there's excellent actors. They have such a good cast.
Yeah, everyone involved. There's literally not a single person involved in the movie I go, oh man, why? Everyone is like a 10 out of 10 for me as far as interest goes. Jason Momoa in the trailer was amazing. And I mean, come on. Jason Momoa in a sci-fi. Come on. I'm in. Khal Drogo in space. Are you kidding me? Yeah, it's Hans Zimmer. Thank you. I knew it was Zimmer. I couldn't remember the first name. I have too many Malazan names rolling around my damn brain right now. And then Red Rising with every Roman or history inspired
name, right? All the owls.
Matt Keen, I'm more excited about Dune than any of the upcoming shows. Honestly, I think I agree with you. This is the first time that I haven't that I've been excited about a movie like really since Interstellar. Like I haven't been hyped. I haven't been to a movie theater in like 4 years, and I love that everything comes to HBO Max. I just watch on my television. I'm going to IMAX for this.
Yes,
I'm gonna go. And man, I agree. Dune looks perfect. Couple of marvelous cheesy dialogue has me slightly worried, but I'm sure it won't be too bad. I think that's a given. I think that'll happen. Now hopefully it doesn't be overbearing on the movies, but some of that Marvel dialogue is passable because the movies are great, right? People love them.
And probably for the trailer to draw people in, I'm assuming they want to make sure people don't think this is too serious. I don't know. I mean, fans are going to love it, but they want to draw in that bigger audience. So, you throw a couple of one-liners in there and people are like, oh, okay, I'll go see this.
Yeah, they are going for mass appeal. They're absolutely going for mass appeal. People are saying they want to redo it. And I'll tell you what, I was actually thinking about, I was going to announce this as my TBR. I think, and it won't be like super structured, but I think I'm just going to declare on my TBR and you guys will hear it first. August is Dune month. It's Dune month. And I'm going to do a review. And then I'll tell you what, at the end of August, after like at the very end, I'll do a Dune spoiler discussion stream and Sarah will have you on. What do you think?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's do it. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that would be great.
And maybe I can talk to Rhythma, because I know that she is also going to be she's going to be rereading it in August, and some other people. So I'll kind of coordinate, and I guess you guys are the first to hear it. But yeah, in August at the end, I'll obviously have a review. That's obvious. But the end of the month, I'll do a Dune spoiler discussion. So if you want to read Dune and you want to do the read along, go ahead and read it. And then in the Discord, which is a part of my Patreon perks, I'm sure we'll be talking about in there. I think Noel and a couple other people wanted to join in and talk about it in there. So that could be really, really fun.
Yeah, the shorter trailer, like the teaser trailer that I saw, looked so good, so good. But I do wonder. My husband and I have vastly different reading tastes. So his favorite fantasy author of all time is R.A. Salvatore. He loves the like D&D, like
Forgotten Realms.
action packed. Yes. So he thought Dune was really hard to get through. He was like, "This is the most boring book that I've ever read." But I think that I will like it. But I do wonder, like, is this going to be an instance where I like the movie more than I like the book? And who knows? Haven't read the book yet, but I feel like it's one of those movies that could definitely do that. Like, I see, despite the fact that I love the Lord of the Rings books, I can see why some people prefer the movie.
I say the same thing, because people try to get under my skin. Hey, movies are better. I'm like, yeah, no shit. Like, they're the best movies ever. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, they cleaned up the Academy Awards handedly. You know, I mean, was it the Academy Awards? I don't know my awards. Is it an Oscar? I don't know.
They're the same thing. I think the Academy Awards are the Oscars.
Oh yeah, I knew that. I totally knew that.
I think.
Listen, the only thing that matters is that Robin Hobb won a Lifetime Award in fantasy this week.
I saw that. Was it Joe Abercrombie who tweeted about it? Who was it? Someone, another author shouted her out, right?
Oh, authors R.J. Barker's. I mean, Robin Hobb is not only a great author, she's a great person. Mm-hmm. She has such good relationships with everyone in the genre, because she's a giving, caring, kind person. And for her to... the fact that she wasn't mentioned on the Times 100 list is flabbergasting.
That list is hilarious.
It's terrible. It's awful. But yeah, the official title of it, I think it's literally the Lifetime Achievement Award in fantasy. Mm-hmm. If someone can give me the official in chat, I'd appreciate that very much. But yeah, hats off to Robin Hobb for winning that. I'm sure she's watching at home right now. Robin, great. Megan, great job.
Great job.
Great work. We're proud of you. And I you know, it like legitimately, like it felt like a loved one getting an accomplishment, because I just finished the series. Mm-hmm. So like I just had such an appreciation for the fact that she got that. And I feel like she does not get the nods that she deserves.
And she's kind of, she must be, I presume, a humble person, because she's not out there like doing all these interviews and putting all of her thoughts out there. Like, there are some authors that you have an excess of information about, you know, yes, everything about them, you know, their whole lives, but it's actually kind of tricky to find information about Robin Hobb.
Yeah, so she did a sit down with Gurm, and they were asking her about the show, and she's like, I actually haven't seen the latest episode because we don't get service out where I live. Like, she is very private. And I know she has chickens because she tweets about them every now and then. And Lost Discovery says Robin replied to Jimmy Sweet. She did reply to my tweet.
Did she reply to one of your tweets? Is this real?
All right. Actually, I'm gonna pick a bone with another author. How about this? Listen. The Realm of the Elderlings, if you include the novellas, is 4.1 million words. I made a tweet. I said 4.1 million words later, and here we are. You know, what adventure, Robin Hobb, you're the greatest. I love you. Blah 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 blah. She responds and puts, I'm shocked to learn it was that many, and it made my day. And then Mark Lawrence, actually me. Actually, hello, it's me, Mark Lawrence, the author of The Broken Empire, and it's actually 3.9 million. Hey, Mark, let me have my moment, bro. Chill. And you know what? You know what makes me mad is that I actually, you know, when I looked at a different site and it said, oh yeah, the main series is only 3.9 million. The novellas put it over to 4.1. And I'm like, I should have read the novella. I'm saving the novellas for like a treat for myself. But if I had read it, I could have tweeted back and been like, oh, well, actually, Mark, you're wrong. It really rubbed me the wrong way. I'm like, I mean, I don't have a vendetta against the guy. I'm obviously like being lighthearted. But next time if someone sees Mark Lawrence, just tell him, chill on the actuallys, brother. Chill.
Oh, that's amazing. That is, I make it my habit not to comment on what real people do, because I feel like when you're in my line of work, you have to be really careful about what you say.
Right.
That is a very interesting thing to do.
And like, I don't think he was being malicious, but like, I was like, dude, and that's like my biggest tweet of all time. I think it had 800 retweets, and I mean, it's the closest to viral you can go in the book corner, I think, in fantasy. But dude, this guy was going around his day. He's sitting back there with tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of books sold, and he said, I better dust off the old the QWERTY keyboard here. I got to dunk on this booktuber who has I'm almost at 3,000 subs. Maybe that's why he knows it's coming. But you know, this dude, is it because I haven't reviewed his books? Like I'll be honest. I thought it was a little petty. So I also was petty. And I said, well, on my imaginary TBR that I don't keep track of, I'm going to bump down The Broken Empire.
Get out of here.
I was immediately like, well, I'm not reading him next year. I'll show him. I should have tweeted that back. Like, you just got moved down, mister. Hey, Buster.
This story just keeps getting better.
Have you read any Mark Lawrence?
I read the Book of the Ancestor trilogy, which I did like, you know, despite his tweeting douchebaggery. I did like
it is. Let's call it for what it was. I mean,
yeah, that's I don't know. It's like it feels kind of like stealing candy from a baby. Like someone's having such like you're just having a nice time over here, and nope.
Like I'm sitting there emotionally destroyed at the end of Fits in the Full. I am embarrassed how much emotion has been evoked out of me in the last 24 hours from a book.
Mm-hmm.
And this dude slides in on his Office Max chair, pushes over all the awards I'm sure he's won, and he was like,
ready.
Girl with the Stars 3 is going to have to wait. Is it even out? I don't know. I'm never going to buy it now. Piss me off.
Yeah. Fair. This is your moment.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the real part of the story.
Yeah, what was it?
Robin Hobb retweeted you. You can't take that away.
Yeah, she replied to me.
She replied to you.
As a kind human being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was very excited, but I did get a little wind out of my sails from old Prince of Thorns himself or whatever. He's probably fine. It's honestly, he sounds like an author I'd really enjoy. I'll have to bring him on, and no chance.
Force an apology.
Literally no chance. Robin Hobb's the only author I've ever wanted to interview. I wanted to interview John Gwynne, but like, I want to interview John Gwynne, but I don't necessarily know if I want to talk about books with John Gwynne. Like John Gwynne's the kind of dude I want to have like a beer with, and like
he's so cool.
Yeah, it sounds like he has an interesting life. His family's awesome. Like I would love to do an interview with John Gwynne where we do this. Like I would want to do 3 hours with John Gwynne, not 30 minutes or an hour. So that maybe I should see if John Gwynne wants to come on Chatting with Nuts. That'd be really cool.
Yes, you should do it. There's actually there's a microbrewery in Newfoundland, because up on the Northern Peninsula, which is where I'm from, there is a Viking settlement, Lansa Meadows it's called. And so it was a Viking settlement. They've kind of rebuilt it up. It's a National Historic Site, but someone opened a microbrewery that is Viking themed, and it's called Ragnarok because Newfoundland is called The Rock.
Yeah. And
it has all of these like Viking themed beer. So as I was reading The Shadow of the Gods, I was drinking this Viking themed beer, and I felt amazing. Even Mark Lawrence couldn't have brought me down from that moment. If he made a snooty tweet about it, it wouldn't have taken the wind out of my sails.
Well, actually, Sarah, I don't know if you've read the Ancestor book or. I'm being rude. I'm just kidding. Mark Lawrence doesn't even sound like that. Yeah, I mean, I think that I would love to sit down and have a conversation with John Gwynne, and in the long form. Robin Hobb, I would only want like 15 to 20 minutes with, so she couldn't realize that I was a dumbass.
And it would be hard not to sound like a dumbass. Like this is, I went to San Diego Comic-Con in 2012, which was the beginning of like the Game of Thrones TV show craze. And I was mostly there for book stuff. So most of the stuff that I attended was book panels and all that kind of stuff. And I met George R. R. Martin and I met Patrick Rothfuss, two authors that I really love. And I sounded like a blithering idiot the whole time. Like there was nothing intelligent came out of my mouth.
Yeah, I don't know what I would what would I even say to George R. R. Martin? Oh, Theon, dude. Theon, bro. Like when the thing happened, dude, and he's like, yeah, and I'm like, it's crazy. It's like when Chris Farley used to interview people on Saturday Night Live. Did you ever see those skits? Mm-hmm. Remember that time you did the thing with the thing? Yeah, it was awesome, man.
Like, sadly, we're not as funny as Chris Farley, so it wouldn't work out.
Yeah, I don't have the charisma of a Chris Farley. Robin Hobb is definitely someone I would love to interview because there are choices that she made that I found to just be so like subtle and interesting, and I want to know why she took the routes that she did on some of the like the big crossroads in the series. Mm-hmm. I would just love to sit down with her and do that, but like I would be terrified of going too long and like boring her with my dialogue. Like I would be very, very nervous.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. She has to be a very smart lady.
Yeah. Oh, if you've never watched her talk that she did with George, it's phenomenal. Yeah, they have the same editor. So they sat down with their editor and did a talk, and it's like an hour, and it's really, really awesome.
Someone can link that too. Yeah. Link me all the things that I need.
What, Andrew, that's a very weird thing to like. Then just don't meet them. It's totally within your power not to meet them. You know what I mean? Like that's one of the easier actions you could do. I think is just like, oh, they're going to be there. I'm not going to go there.
And back then, so the Wise Man's Fear came out in 2011. So this was only the next year. There was hope. There was hope. The hope was alive.
Know the backstory to the book 3? Because didn't he tweet or put up a picture of the manuscript and it was huge for Doors of Stone?
Yeah.
What happened? Do you know?
I don't know. All I know is what I have followed along online. So I know that he released, so there was some sort of picture from his Twitch at one point where someone had zoomed in and been able to extrapolate something from some file. And then there was a picture of a stack of papers that he showed once. And then there was that tweet from his editor or his agent who said that she's never seen a piece of work from him since 2011. She doesn't even think he's writing anymore. And so it's been all over the place, but I have just tried to come to terms with it the same way that you have with the Song of Ice and Fire, is that I really love those books. When I met Patrick Rothfuss, he was a very, very kind person.
He seems really nice.
He made me feel not at all like an idiot, which is exactly what I was acting like. And he made me feel really comfortable. He was very gracious toward all of his fans. And I know there's been some difficulties, or just from following along online, it seems like there has been over the years. But I can't get rid of that positive experience that I had. I would love to read the third book. I am not in the camp of people who will now not read the third book because they're angry that it hasn't been written yet. But it doesn't take away from the fact that I really enjoy the other two.
Yeah, that's a series I'm going to get to next year. I'm just going to read them, and people are like, "Oh, I don't care. It is what it is." Like,
yeah, I think Patrick and I are going to reread them next year whenever the 10th anniversary edition comes out for Wise Man's Fear.
All right, well, I'll do it with you. Mm-hmm. That's the 30th read along we've planned.
Right? Yeah, this is what we're doing tonight. Is we're planning all of our read alongs.
Well, discovered I met Sarah. I tried to distract him with books to sign so I could steal his notes. Unfortunately, for you, when he signs, he doesn't stop doing whatever he's doing. Even when he's featured on other people's talk shows, he just continuously signs things. So you're going to have to come up with something better.
I did get to meet Brandon Sanderson too. He was really nice, but I had not read any of his books at that time. So it was a total waste. I apologize to everyone who loves him that I had that experience because I had nothing to bring to the table there.
That's awesome. LOI, say how it is. Oh, I'm not picking on you, Andrew. I mean, I'm kind of picking on you. I'm just having fun here. Hey, everyone go sub to Andrew's Wizardly Reads.
Mm-hmm. Do Andrew's it. Awesome.
He's a nice guy. He's a nice guy. I'm just kidding around.
Andrew just read The Ember Blade, and we got to have a big discussion about the ending of it. So
I am very interested in that book. So I read a book earlier this year, and it was a re-release of a self-published book that then got picked up by a publisher. It's I think it's an indie publisher, and it was called God, oh man, hold on. So he changed the name twice. Originally, it was called something else, and he changed it to the Emberblade. And I read it when it was the Emberblade and reviewed it on my channel, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what it's called anymore. It's called Valley of Embers. It's the Landkiss saga. So I really want to read and review that book that you're talking about, Emberblade. But I think people who are on my channel will be like, didn't you review this book like 3 months ago? But but that other book has since went underneath another name change. So it's like, I
like the Emberblade. It was it definitely has some of those classic fantasy tropes. There's a little bit of a horror element. There's a lot of that found family stuff. I really liked it. I enjoyed it.
I didn't realize how much I loved found family until Dark Tower.
Yeah, the best found family.
I would say it might just be because it's the best found family.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very much true. So Emberblade, kind of give me a little bit of a pitch as far as like its qualities. When it comes, like, is it high prose? Like,
the prose is fair. It's not poor. It's not overly flowery. It's not beautiful. It's kind of middle of the ground, but accessible, fits the book well. The things that I think it does well is it maintains good pace. So it's a chunky book. It's about 800 pages. But I think that it does a really good job of maintaining tension the whole way through. The characters I really liked, but I didn't realize how much I liked them until I got to the end of the book. They crept up and they grew on me. And then the end of the book brought out a lot of emotion. And I was like, oh, wow, they really did creep in there. And at the heart, there is like a main friendship. And that is one of the things I really like, a good friendship in fantasy. So I did like the main friendship between the two characters. It does have coming of age aspects. So if you don't like that, then you might not like the book, because there is a heavy coming of age aspect.
Nah, I like coming of age. I don't have a problem with it. There was a point in time where I was trying to be kind of hipster, and I was like, I don't like coming of age anymore. I do. If it's done well, I still love it.
Mm-hmm.
If you mention Doors of Stone, Rothis drives by your house and washes all of your sidewalk chalk dry. Is this true, Sarah? Can you confirm?
Yeah, has happened. My children cried and cried.
He came out to the island and washed off all of the drawings. Oh my goodness.
Heartbroken.
Friendship is fantasy. In fantasy is severely lacking from what I've read so far. I've heard that I'm just gonna say Greycoats. Sullivan. Greycoats. Okay. Yeah, I've heard Greycoats is really good as well. I was thinking Michael J. Sullivan. A lot of people say that he does.
They do. Everybody loves Royce and Hadrian, but the Greycoats trump Royce and Hadrian. Let this be my most unpopular opinion of the night. I will fight on that hill.
Sarah with the hot hand and the hot takes.
Mm-hmm.
She said, "Oh, Sullivan, he's fine.
He's fine.
He's fine."
No, I did. His books are, I think that they have, they're a great entry into fantasy books from what I have read. So I'm only in 3 of 6. So I'm halfway through the second omnibus of Michael J. Sullivan's books. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, and I think this will improve as I go through his books more and when I read the prequels, but to me, so far, Royce and Hadrian are a duo that I'm being told are really good friends, but I haven't felt that connection. Whereas when I read the Greycoats, I felt that connection between the friendships from the very beginning of the book. And I felt like they just grew and grew from there. But I do like the Rhaeria Revelations. What I've read of it so far, I like it. I don't love it.
Interesting. You know, I'm gonna be honest right now, and this is terrible of me. And this is not the case, but this is this isn't like how I end up feeling when I hear a series. People say, "Oh, it's like really lighthearted and it's about friendship and like, you know what I mean? Like it's a feel good fantasy." For some reason, I immediately go, "I'll get to it later." I don't know why that is. Like, why do I like to be stomped on?
This is we enjoy pain, but this is the biggest dupe. If anyone ever tells you to read the Greycoats and sells it that way, it is dark. It is bleak. There's a lot of the main character grappling with the mistakes that he has made and how they are influencing what is happening in the world. He has to come to terms with how his perceived acts of heroism actually have a negative impact on people, and how the choices that he makes that seem to be good choices in the moment actually echo out and have these really negative reverberations, and how the bad guys some of the points that they make and some of the things that they're working toward, even though the methods are completely against everything that the main character stands for, ultimately they might be better for the world than his particular brand of heroism. So there's a lot. I do think that it's underrated. And I know a lot of people were talking about it when Mike read it on his channel. And I think there's a lot of conflicting opinions on it. But I do think that it has a lot more to offer than just that kind of swashbuckling good time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well.
And I cried so many times. So many times when I was reading it.
I mean, I'll be honest. This stream, Grey Coats has always been on the TBR, like since I joined BookTube, because Alex told me about it. This definitely has got me a little bit more interested. Maybe I can squeak it in next year. I'm not guaranteeing it, but you have me interested. You have me interested. One thing that Lost Discovery said here, and I want to touch on this really quickly, is and it's what you said. I have an issue a lot. Authors telling me a character best friends, but I literally don't feel it for a minute. This is how this perfectly describes the beginning of my hangups in the Wheel of Time. And there's others after that, but I think that's kind of what he's alluding to. It bothers me. I don't know. It just bothers me. People are going off at for the Grey Coats. Oh, Darren, thank you so much for the man. Darren, you're beyond generous, my friend. My goodness. Biggest surprise read of the year. What is it for you, Sarah?
So I guess dual answer. Biggest surprise in me getting something that I was not expecting is what I got with Grey Coats. So I was also expecting it to be this lighthearted, like I love the Three Musketeers. I'm all about that. Like I said, I like heroic fantasy. I enjoy a good adventure, good versus evil sometimes, but I was not prepared for the complexity that I was going to get and the how realistic the relationships would feel and how invested I would become in the characters. Just in terms of a book that I wasn't expecting to like as much as I did, Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, I read earlier this year, which is, it kind of takes place, it's like a pre-Columbian America's setting. It has like some elements of the occult, some like things that I don't usually go for in fantasy, but I ended up really liking it. It was a book that came up from the library when I was needing something to like read. I was somewhere, I didn't have a book. I was like, oh, this is new, this is available, I'll read it, and had zero expectations, but really ended up enjoying it.
Yeah, that's one that I constantly see at the bookstores. It's I've been on sale a bunch on Kindle as well, and it's like just one of those. I'm like, God, I should make time for that because the whole pre-Columbian. I mean, it's really interesting. The setting just sounds very unique, and it's something that I would actually like to read. I don't know when I would get to it. Biggest surprise for me, I think I said this in my book tag. I hope I'm using the same answer, but The War of the Flowers by Tad Williams. I wasn't sure how I'd feel about. Outside of Osterhard, Tad's writing is different in it. It's not as flowery prose, but it's still really great writing. Actually, a little bit more digestible than Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn was. But it was urban portal fantasy, which I didn't know I loved until I read War of the Flowers. And it's a retelling, not a retelling. It's an adult fairy tale, but it's so good. And those are like things I would never look for whenever I'm picking stuff off the shelf. And he just blew me away with it. And I loved it. And also it has one of the most interesting backstories to a fantasy book, in my opinion. It's very much a product of its time. It came out in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it has like pagers and beepers and stuff in it, which I think is kind of funny. But Tad actually had to rewrite a major event that happens in the middle of the book because of 9/11. Wow. He actually had written it before 9/11, but it was a 9/11, pretty much the exact same thing as 9/11. Wow. And they were like, hey, yeah, bro, you have to change this. Like, you can't publish this. He's like, but I wrote it before, but, and so he changed it and it ended up coming out like a couple years late because of that. Wow. And in the middle, and even then it's still kind of eerily similar, but it's just interesting that it's an interesting piece of history, like a little moment, a special Tad moment where he had to release it later. But that book was really, really good. I really like War of the Flowers. I think it's a great entry point for Tad Williams. And yeah, I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. It's my favorite standalone fantasy ever.
Really? So, yes. Oh, wow. Urban fantasy is a bit of a harder sell for me, but it's pretty high praise. So.
Yeah, the portal fantasy definitely snuck up on me, and then Dark Tower took it another step. And I'm like, oh, I really like this. Don't worry, Jimmy, just because people are friends in books. Yeah, you're right. Alan, I promise, if anything, like I have my set TBR for the remainder of the year. If I fit anything, it's Long Price Quartet. before Daniel Abraham's new book. A Fantasy Babble, what's up, man? New patron that signed up today. I appreciate it. Along with Andrew's Wizardly Reads, I appreciate that as well. And Andrew Krause was in here earlier too. My Patreon is just exploded. I've had it up for like 2.5 weeks, and we're almost at 30 people.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty. People are very generous. A Fantasy Babble, just read Black Sun. It was so good. Yeah, I have not heard a bad thing about it, to be honest.
I liked it. The only complaint that I would make is that there's a lot of buildup, but I really like that. So that's not necessarily a bad thing for me, but I could see some people saying like there's a lot of buildup and then it's kind of this like furious ending. Like all of these things are happening in the last couple of chapters and then the book is over. So, but I like that building up part.
I don't mind, especially for a standalone.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for a standalone.
No, it is going to be a series, but that is.
Oh, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, whatever. I can handle it. Otherland is on. I would love to squeeze Otherland out in 2022. I could read Tad Williams all day long. I've never come across a con in Tad's writing yet. Like Tad, for all intents and purposes, should be the best writer I've ever read. I just happen to like Hobb and Gurm. I like a smidge more, but those are my top three. With Joe Abercrombie and Gwyn kind of peeking through to the top three. Just in Time, phenomenal name. Just finished Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Yeah, I have reviews for Dragonbone Chair alone, and then also the trilogy here on the channel. And I also have a Lands of Ostnar lore video that I worked really hard on that was okay, but you should go check that out. I love Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn.
Nice. I have not read it, but I would like to.
Oh, you would. Oh, so here's the thing. Next time you want to reread Lord of the Rings, just read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. I really. It is the gap closer between Tolkien and Gurm.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy, are you getting the Grim Oak? So I know they were releasing. I haven't seen anything announced yet. If it is, throw it at me in Discord or Twitter or whatever, because I want to get on that list to buy that, because I will spend a ridiculous amount of money on Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn.
Are these illustrated editions?
Yeah, it's supposed to. I mean, that's the problem. Is unfortunately, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn books. I mean, the old covers are cool. They're like pulpy fantasy, which are cool. Michael Wellen, or what's his name? It's Michael Wellen, right? He's the famous guy.
I'm not sure.
They're great, but they're mass market paperbacks. I'd like to get a bigger display ones. But yeah, Jimmy Bobby Dollar is Tad's only miss. Yeah, I haven't found one yet. I have heard that he has a few. So Tad, this is actually a funny story. Tad got signed to DAW Books because he wrote Tail Chaser's Song, which is a fantasy story with cats. And the guy from Dahl was like at a convention with him and was such a massive fan of the series that when he met Tad, he's like, "What do we got to do to get you with us?" And he's like, "What do you have down the pipe?" And Tad's like, "I got this idea for this epic fantasy series, but it's gonna be ridiculously long." And the guy's like, "I don't care what it is. I want you to write it underneath DAW." And that's how he got with his publisher.
Wow.
And that's why Memory of Sorrow and Thorn has, I think to this date, still the longest fantasy book ever published.
Wow. How many pages is it?
It's absurd. It's over 500,000 words. To Green Angel Tower. It had to be split into 2 volumes. And then his new trilogy, which is the sequel trilogy, he actually did the same thing with book 3, but they're forcing him to make it into a quartet. So it's no longer a trilogy.
Right.
Which is kind of funny.
That's amazing.
Oh, Andrew's Discord is doing Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn starting August.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have so many things that I need to read.
Yeah, I get it. There's no real pressure. Yeah, I do this to everybody that comes on. I just end up trying to like force things onto your TBR. And usually it's Hobb and Tad Williams.
Mm-hmm.
I just started Dragonbone Chair. Give me Lord of the Dream. Gorman has vibes. Yeah. Yeah. To me, every time I want to reread Lord of the Rings, I'd rather just remember Sorrow and Thorn. That's kind of how I feel. You have magic rings. You have magic mirrors. You have magic swords. You have the inspiration for the White Walkers, which is amazing.
That is awesome. And that is one of the series that I would like to do on the channel is the books that inspired some of our favorite authors. Yeah. So I have Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn on that list. I think it is for George R. R. Martin.
Patrick Rothfuss.
And Patrick Rothfuss, probably.
Yep. Yeah.
Gormenghast is one of the books that I included on the books for people who are interested in writing fantasy. I think.
Yeah, that was actually one of the first times I've heard of it, to be honest with you, which I think is a cardinal sin. but it's true.
Yeah, it doesn't get a lot of, it doesn't get talked about a lot, not just on booktube, but in general. I think it got swallowed by some of the more accessible epic fantasy, and it is definitely an acquired taste. If you like action driven stories, you will hate it. It's very dense. It's very like there's a lot of intricate work put into the setting, but the characters are interesting. The setting is so vibrant. It's totally worth reading. And I think there was an adaptation, like a BBC adaptation.
Yeah, I think there is. I think I remember someone saying that I should read it then watch it. I think people like the adaptation. I might be wrong about that.
I don't know. I feel like I never know about TV. I don't watch a lot of TV, to be
Yeah.
honest. And I did watch, like, I watched Game of Thrones when that came out. And I do watch some anime because the episodes are so short. They're only 20 minutes. So I can kind of get through a couple and kind of put them in here or there. But I am not up on any pop culture things outside of books.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I don't even play a lot of video games anymore or anything. Unfortunately.
I didn't evolve past the side scroll, unfortunately.
That's okay. Those are some of the best.
The last game I was really good at was Bubble Bobble.
Have you heard how Tad got the editor to publish Tail Chaser's song? No, I don't know how he got it published. I just know that the people like who signed him for Memory Song and Thorn loved it. And Tad was kind of their brand maker at DAW, because if you think about who's joined since, the big names I think are Patrick Rothfuss and also Christopher Rocchio, who's doing the Sun Eater series for sci-fi, and all three of them have beautiful prose.
They have really nice covers too. I haven't read them, but I did do a video asking for sci-fi recommendations, and people said that was really good. But yes, a lot of fantasy writers love. So this is how I heard of Gormenghast. Is I really love Neil Gaiman, and he talks about it a lot. I think it inspired him, and I used to be a vigilant reader of his blog. So and like any interview or anything that I could find with him in it, I would listen. So that's how I heard of Gormenghast.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. You just released a video, and it's very thorough, and it's the ultimate reading. It's like basically a Neil Gaiman guide. And I like the fact that he has a lot of variety. And I like that you broke it up into genres or subgenres. I thought that was really interesting. For everyone watching, what is your number one go-to recommendation if you've never read any Gaiman? Because I haven't.
Yeah, so and part of why I broke the video up like that is because I think he's a hard author to give a really concrete answer for, because he's so versatile in his style. He writes so many different things, and not all authors can do that. Some authors do certain things very well, but I think that he does a lot of things really well. So what I said at the end of that video was, if you're looking for something that is whimsical, I would start with Stardust. It is, his take on the fairy tale. If you are looking for something literary, then you could definitely start with The Ocean at the End of the Lane, which I feel like is the most literary of his works.
Yeah, that's the one I was going to try. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you just want to get a sense of his style, you could definitely try Norse mythology. If you loved Shadow of the Gods and you want to know more about that, that's an excellent place to start. Neverwhere is also great. Neverwhere, I feel like, is his most straightforward book. Like, if you're looking for like a good fantasy plot, you said that you just enjoyed some urban fantasy, then Neverwhere is definitely a good place to start. I really like the villains in Neverwhere. I think they're very creepy, and I think that he does it well. He takes a trope that can be really overdone and that I have seen other people do. I've seen a similar kind of presentation, without any spoilers, a similar type of thing from Brandon Sanderson, and I did not like it as much as I did in Neverwhere.
Interesting.
American Gods is great. I just feel like in order to appreciate it, it wouldn't be my first stop. And yes, so I did not include Sandman in the video. I didn't include his graphic novels, and I didn't include Good Omens or the other books that he's written with other people. Sandman is just like a class of its own, in my opinion.
Damn, really?
Yeah.
You know what? I'll tell you what. I've never read a graphic novel. I might give Sandman a try.
Sandman's excellent.
And they're doing the adaptation, which I think is going to be awesome, as Gwendolyn Christie from Game of Thrones.
Mhm.
in it, which gets me hyped because I thought she was phenomenal. Evie had something here. How you doing, Evie? There's a new book series called Mordu by Alex Feby, I don't know, coming out in September that cover-wise and writing style of what I've read feels incredibly like Titus Grown, also of what I've read. Very interesting. Very cool. Mordu was great. Sandman, do it. Yeah, people really love Sandman. So you think it's in its class by its own?
Yeah, I think it's phenomenal.
Okay.
I think, but I personally think that Neil Gaiman's imagination is in a class of its own. I think that he is just one of the best in terms of, if you want imaginative, whimsical. Although Sandman has its dark moments too, but he is just excellent. It is so. My husband reads a lot more graphic novels than I do, and Sandman is his favorite ever.
Wow. Okay. Mm-hmm. I might go to the bookstore tomorrow and pick it up. Damn it.
I can't see you not liking it. It is definitely the perfect transition graphic novel for someone who loves fantasy.
I'm excited for it. Fantasy Babbles. There's an interview somewhere on the internet where Tad talks about how he asked the editor for a copy of the manuscript because his copy was lost in a house fire. This got the editor to read it. He asked the editor for a copy of the manuscript because his copy was lost. How interesting. Tad is a very silly guy. He's very funny, especially on social media. He's very odd, and it shines through in his works. He's not afraid to. He's kind of like King. He's not afraid to get a little weird and out there, and he'll take you to some weird places. Well, Sandman is now on my list too. Well, this is awesome. All right. Well, it's been 2.5 hours, which is wild. I think I'm going to call it a night here, so I don't take up all of your time. I know you have family and your kiddos and everything, so I don't want to hold you too long.
Oh, they'll be up at 6, guaranteed.
Yeah. And we have Shadow of the Gods to talk about tomorrow, or not Shadow. I'm sorry, Time of Dread. Time of Dread tomorrow.
I have to remind myself where that book stopped, because it's harder to go back and talk about a series once you finished it.
Yes,
it's going to be hard to talk about book one, because the way I felt about certain characters definitely changed over the course of the series. So I gotta refresh my mind, because unlike, like we talked about the Dark Tower, how each book feels very distinct, those books, as much as I love them, they do blend together a little bit. I find it hard to remember what happened in each one, as opposed to just thinking of them as a story.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's why a lot of times if I don't get a review out before I continue a series, I end up just reviewing the whole trilogy, because I don't want to have to break it up in my head, and I can just compile my notes and make a review like that. So I feel I need to go check my notes I took when I read it. Because that was beginning of the year. I think that was the second book I read in the new year, I think. So there's been a lot since then. I think I've read like 40 or 50 books this year. So I got to remind myself and be sharp for tomorrow, because I'm be with the killers tomorrow. I mean, these are the sharpest minds we have on the platform. So
it'll be fun, though. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be really good. If you guys are interested in the Time of Dread talk, that'll be on Alex Nevaez's channel tomorrow at 10 a.m. Sarah, where can people find? I know your channel is linked in the description below, and I also tagged you. So if you don't follow Sarah, please go and do that. She's amazing, makes some great content. Really looking forward to those character studies. Where else on the internet can people find you?
So I also have an Instagram that I do link in my videos, but I'm not very good at updating it. I only have so much time for things. But I recently opened a Discord channel because people wanted to be able to do some buddy reads and have some of those discussions.
Wonderful.
So in my most recent video, I do have that linked, and I'll probably try to pop it up on my community tab as well. But yeah, if anybody ever wants to drop in, chat about some characters, I always love sharing my thoughts about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, thank you so much for your time on a Friday night. I really appreciate you stopping by. I knew I was going to learn stuff, and I did. I learned words like framework. I learned how your brain works whenever you're trying to identify what makes a character important to you, and I love that as a character reader. So it's been a pleasure to talk to you tonight.
Thank you so much. I'll see you again tomorrow.
Yeah, I will see you again tomorrow. And for everyone in chat, thank you for being here. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for being active. I mean, this is amazing. I mean, we've started something here, folks. 40, 50 people hanging out, on a Friday night talking about books. I can't imagine a better way to spend my Friday night.
Me neither.
It's amazing. And if you want to support me, like and subscribe to the video. I'm pretty sure you've already done that. And I do have my Patreon, which has a Discord for all my patrons, which is really cool. And my second tier, you get to help vote on my TBR when I put up polls for that. And then the Kingsguard people, my top tier patrons, actually get to do a monthly hangout with me. I'm probably going to do 2 a month to account for all the time zones because it's really hard. But we do like a video chat, and it's a really good time. We just had our first one. It was absolutely phenomenal. But I just want to thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, sharing your Friday evening with me. It's wild that we have this and that we're building this community, and it's starting to grow. I'm almost at 3,000 subs, which is just...
I can't wait to see it go higher and higher. You deserve it.
I appreciate it. I hope everyone in chat, and Sarah, I hope you have a good night. Be safe, be well, everyone. Remember to always keep turning the page.